Chapter 1585. Duque couldn't figure out the connection between the water elemental creatures of the current material world and the water elemental world that coexisted in another space dimension in the world of Azeroth. Anyway, he could feel that the frost elements leading to the magic core had been completely cut off. It was the same kind of cut-off and diversion, but Hydraxia's water element was much more beautiful. Malygos's cut-off was actually a diversion, not a real cut-off. As long as Duque spent some time, he could still find a new elemental vein. The cut-off of the water element was really the kind that cut off without leaving a way out. Above the north wind taiga. Kacha. It was a sound that did not exist in the ears of mortals. Only existences sensitive to elements could hear this sound that sounded weak, but was actually shocking. All the blue dragons who were fighting felt their hearts skip a beat. A huge wave of frost elements gathered from all directions in the north wind taiga. It wasn't gathering but escaping. As if the stopper was pulled out of a water tank, all the frost elements near the Warsong stronghold were sucked into the void. Ripples of unease rippled in this elemental airspace, spreading in all directions. At this moment, all the Alliance and Horde mages in the north wind taiga could not sense the existence of frost elements at the same time. The only place that could make them feel the frost elements was Duque's magic net. Unfortunately, the magic net had shrunk so much that as long as they were more than 200 meters away from Naxxramas, or the Fearless Stronghold, they could no longer summon frost elements. The blue dragons in the sky widened their eyes in horror. Their yellow vertical pupils looked left and right. At this time, they found that not only the water elemental world, but even the fire elemental world was no longer responding. Someone so powerful that they were unrivaled had forcibly cut off their connection with the fire elemental world. Alarms rang in their hearts. The blue dragons finally woke up from their dream of being invincible. Times had changed. It was no longer the era 25,000 years ago when the dragons covered the sky, stood at the top of the food chain, and could do whatever they wanted. Hydraxia's water element sealed the source of Malygos's frost element. By killing Logger's clone Duque, who controlled part of the fire elemental realm's authority, also sealed the source of Malygos's fire element. At this moment, Malygos's dragon weave, which used the magic pivot as its core, seemed a little unworthy of its name. The only core element left in Malygos was the arcane element. Azeroth magic was very interesting. There were 6 main categories: arcane, frost, fire, nature, holy, and shadow. The origin of the world was clearly earth, water, fire, and wind. Water and fire each formed their own system, but earth and wind were included in the natural system. Nature magic was generally considered to be on the side of shamans and druids, and was not considered to be part of traditional magic. Holy was on the side of priests. Although it was magic, it was not under Malygos's control. Not to mention Aning. The Titan granted Malygos the authority of the King of Magic, which was the authority to manage the magic of the 3 elements: arcane, ice, and fire. At this time, both ice and fire couldn't be used, leaving only the arcane element. Thus, the Warsong beastmen who were suffering in the vicinity of the Warsong stronghold were stunned to discover that the originally ferocious blue dragons, who were incessantly flapping their wings to drive away the ice elements and turn one beastman after another into ice sculptures, were suddenly silenced. The magic that could be used had become pure arcane magic. Gurus, who was still fighting fiercely below, could be said to have the deepest understanding of this. As a warrior who had stepped into the realm of heroes, Gurus was much more durable than the small fries. In addition, Sal valued him and gave him a set of Mount Hyjar-level warrior equipment. He became the only bright spot in this collapsed battlefield. In terms of hand-to-hand combat, Gurus was not inferior to these young or newly adult blue dragons at all. His gorgeous equipment allowed him to clean up one with a few axes. However, the blue dragons could also play magic. A large-scale ice shield. No matter how fast you were, once you entered the range of the shield, you would slow down and suffer frost elemental damage. The jump slash he had learned from his father had become a clown's awkward move. Often he would be frozen in midair like an ice sculpture the moment he jumped high. Even if the blue dragons did not slap him down with their claws or tails, he would still fall in a ridiculous free fall. The blue dragons suddenly couldn't use frost magic, So his chance came. With a big jump, he stepped on the wreckage of a ballista that had been blown away, and performed a beautiful double jump. Garrush was like a rock spreading its wings, pouncing on a young blue dragon that could not dodge in time. In a panic, the young dragon barely flapped its wings and dodged to the left, but because of the angle and momentum, the dragon's neck was grabbed by Garrus, who reacted faster. With a backhand swing of his axe, Garrus chopped off the young dragon's neck. Holding the long dragon's neck in his hand and swinging the limp dragon's head, Garrush fell to the ground with a loud crash, raising a huge cloud of dust and letting out a deafening roar. Aha! Garrush, who had fallen into a frenzied state of killing, did not know a human proverb that someone had passed on to him. Don't show off, or else you'll be struck by lightning. In every tribe there would always be a small number of mutants. For example, Krasus of the Red Dragon clan was a rare master magician among the dragons. Galagos, the ancient blue dragon leading the team, was in a sense, an ancient blue dragon that was not recorded in Azeroth's official history. However, he was indeed different from the blue dragons. For example, his element was wind. Seeing how Garrush was so awesome, killing several blue dragons in a row, and then demonstrating his might and roaring, Galagos sent a lightning strike to Garrush. Bam! Just a moment ago, he had used a roar to replace who else? Garrush, who had come to mock the group, collapsed on the spot, his long fangs gnawing on the frozen soil of the North Wind tundra. Perhaps it was because of the dizziness and paralysis caused by the lightning strike that interfered with his movements, but Garrush did not get up for a long time. Just as Galagos rushed down from the sky, a surging arcane dragon's breath brewing in his mouth, a 10-story tall human shadow suddenly appeared in the void. It was the shadow of Duke Marcus, the demigod of the weave. Duke's shadow raised his left hand gently, and a burly figure that looked 70 to 80% like Garrush rushed out of a portal that suddenly opened. He leaped high like lightning, and the blood-red axe swung from bottom to top like a moon at the bottom of the sea. It was clearly an upward chop with similar movements. But this chop gave Garrush an unparalleled shock to his soul. It was a chop that could split the heavens and the earth. The cold air hovering in the air, the storm, the turbulence of arcane elements. These things that could not be seen with the naked eye were all swept away by the aftermath of this chop. The next second, Galagos let out an extremely shocking scream. Chapter 1586. A guy who had the ability to severely injure an ancient dragon with an axe was rare, even among the heroes. If it was an orc, then the range was even smaller. Garrush struggled to get up and looked into the sky. A blue claw as huge as the pillar of the hall was spinning in the air. In the background, there was a sky full of splashing blue-purple blood, shining with arcane light, and a giant dragon with a face full of fear. The ancient dragon, who had a mocking expression a moment ago, had its facial features squeezed together because of fear. An adult blue dragon fiercely pounced over. The green figure falling from the sky suddenly twisted his waist, so that his body was parallel to the ground. In the next moment, the falling momentum suddenly stopped. This change in rhythm made the adult blue dragon, who was trying to sneak attack, extremely uncomfortable. Just as the blue dragon flapped its wings to slow down so that it could aim at the orc again, the tall and sturdy figure launched, intercept, a horizontal movement in the air that violated the laws of physics. A blood-red arc of axe light lit up again. Then the dust settled. Another cloud of blood mist exploded. Another blue dragon that was struck down. The Blue Dragon Legion in the sky seemed to be completely shocked by this scene. They all let out terrified screams and flapped their wings in panic to escape at high speed. Only then did the tall and sturdy figure descend from the sky and land heavily in front of Garrush. Under the effect of gravity, this figure was like a giant, but also like an insurmountable mountain. Mortals could only look up. Many middle-aged orcs recognized this great orc. It's Grom Hellscream. So young. I heard that he turned to the human demigods and became an oracle to obtain eternal life. What a pity. But he will always be the great hero of our clan and even the entire tribe. After a short moment of hesitation, the simple minds of the orcs made them unconsciously cheer for the real hero. Grom Grom Grom. The Warsong beastmen who were lucky enough to survive the siege of the Blue Dragon Legion all beat their chests with their fists. using the most traditional and primitive method to pay their respects to their former chief, the great hero who would forever stand on the monument of their tribe. Looking at the familiar and unfamiliar face in front of him, Garrush had mixed feelings. This face overlapped with the face of her father in her childhood memories. Young, arrogant, and filled with an insufferably domineering aura. There was no powerful prey that his father couldn't catch. Even the legendary powerful monster Gollin, who could not be dealt with by an entire clan, fell at his father's feet. That was why he was able to inherit a great surname, Hellscream. He would not be like those lowly laborers who did not deserve to have their own surnames. Garush's emotions were extremely complicated. Once upon a time, as a pure-blooded orc, he felt ashamed because his father was the first to drink the devil's blood. When he found out that his father had not betrayed the tribe, but had successfully killed Manaroth, who had deceived the entire tribe, he was overjoyed and proud of his father. Later, my father got old and couldn't fight anymore. His perception of his father took another 180-degree turn. Why don't you die on the battlefield before you grow old? Die a ridiculous death on a sickbed? You don't look like a great orc warrior at all. You actually want to become that human demigod's servant to repay a debt of gratitude after your death. The great orcs never need to repay any kindness to anyone other than the orcs. Hero? Puffed. Nearly a year ago, the strong and healthy Garush scoffed at his father, who was old and weak and constantly tortured by his old injuries. Who would have thought that this day would come? At this moment, at this second. In front of this fortress named after the glorious battle song. The person who turned the tide and saved the Warsong clan was not him, Garush, but his father, who he regarded as the shame of the clan and even the entire tribe. Climbing up from the ground, Garush's protruding fangs were still stained with dirt. His face was flushed with shame. Fortunately, as a pure-blooded orc, his reddish-brown skin covered up his embarrassment. He should have called him father. But the inferiority complex of the past, coupled with the arrogant declaration he had made to his old father before his death, made him completely at a loss as to what kind of expression he should use to face this legendary and contradictory father, who had also become a human oracle after death. His mouth squirmed for a long time, but in the end, not a single word came out. Interestingly, as his father, Grom, also did not say a word. Of course, his slightly sighing and sorrowful eyes could also be translated as son. Dad is very disappointed in you. In this regard, Duque, who was in Madeira as a spectator, felt that it was very funny. If this scene was accompanied by Beethoven's Symphony of Fate, in that sorrowful music, Duque would probably instantly lose his character and laugh out loud. As a transmigrator, of course, Duque knew why the famous Garush was called Brainless Roar. The stupid things he had done in the original history were simply brainless. Duque, who was familiar with history, did indeed have the opportunity to help Brainless Roar change his fate. The problem was, why did Duque have to do this? In the past, Duque had hoped to redeem Arthas and stop him from going astray. But he and Karazhan were blown into the void. No matter how many times he thought about it, Duque still felt that Arthas' fall was the result of a mixture of chance and necessity. The current Brainless Roar, regardless of whether his high IQ of 5 could be saved. First of all, as a human, Duque was not in the position to help an orc, or even help the entire tribe become stronger. Teaching a foreign barbarian race to stab themselves to death with a knife was something that Duque would never do. Secondly, the rise of the pure-blooded orcs, represented by Brainless Roar, was already an irreversible trend in the tribe. Sal could not let millions of his compatriots die in Draenor. So more pure-blooded orcs entered Azeroth than the total number of the tribe at that time. Although it strengthened the tribe's population, it also formed the strongest impact on the tribe's existing ideology. If there was enough food and territory in a peaceful environment, Sal could have brainwashed this group of conservative purebloods to accept new things for another 20 years. Perhaps the tribe could achieve a smooth transition. However, in history, the tribe's territory was twice as large as today's, and they still could not solve this contradiction. In this world, where Duque had premeditated to command the Alliance to seriously squeeze the tribe's living space, how could the tribe make a smooth transition? Sal was now equivalent to being roasted on a fire. As long as the pressure from foreign enemies weakened a little, the contradictions in the tribe were bound to erupt like a volcano. In conclusion, Duque could see it clearly. Whether he killed Brainless Roar in advance or not, there would be new pure-blooded orc heroes who would challenge Sal's leadership and shake the foundation of the tribe's rule. Sooner or later, something would happen to the tribe anyway, so it was better to keep Brainless Roar. At least Duque did not have to be the clown, and he did not have to do this and that behind Grom's back. Chapter 1587. In terms of talent, Braindead Roar was indeed unparalleled. In the realm of warriors, he could even beat Sal. In terms of warriors, only the Ox Chief Cain Bloodhoof could beat him in the entire tribe. However, Duque already had Lord Howl, so why would he still need Braindead Roar? Comparing the way Braindead Roar cut the adult blue dragon, and the way Lord Howl cut the ancient blue dragon, the difference was obvious. Braindead Roar would only blindly squander his talent, mindlessly slashing at the enemy's vital points, completely ignoring any changes in the process. After Master Roar regained the body that was at its peak when he was 18 years old, his 50 years of rich combat experience was undoubtedly revealed in the strike just now. Changing the rhythm just right, he seized the fleeting opportunity to strike fiercely after disrupting the opponent. Adjusting the direction of the axe blade with his wrist, he skillfully dodged the adult blue dragon's final counterattack. Without reducing his speed and strength, he avoided the hardest head of the dragon race and cut diagonally into the dragon's neck, causing the greatest damage. It was no exaggeration to say that with an indestructible 18-year-old body and half a century of bloody battle experience, Lord Howl was worthy of the title of a legendary hero. Only such a Grom Hellroar was the peak of the peak, worthy of Duque breaking the boundaries between the Alliance and the tribe and accepting him as a god's messenger. In the sky, Duque clearly saw the hilarious scene of Lord Howl and his son staring at each other without saying a word. The relationship between Orc father and son was quite deep, but the way they got along was often clumsy, just like how Durotan could sacrifice himself to save Sal. However, most fathers would only teach their children to be great warriors, but not how to be a human. Sal in this life only had Orgrim's personal guidance to achieve his current achievements. Lord Howl and his son. Anyway, Duque could not bear to watch. On the eastern horizon of Battlecry Stronghold, a dense cluster of black dots suddenly appeared. In the blink of an eye, the black dots could be seen in color: red, green, bronze, and a small amount of blue. The distant roar of dragons from the sky announced that the previously silent Dragon Sleep Temple was finally making a big move. At a glance, thousands of giant dragons covered the sky. They were galloping from the more eastern Dragonbone wilderness. With 3 guardian dragons that were as large as small mountains in the lead, they were accompanied by 2 smaller black dragons and blue dragons on both sides, forming the first echelon of attack. Behind them were hundreds of ancient giant dragons, then thousands of adult giant dragons, and tens of thousands of young dragons. This time, the 5-colored giant dragons had come out in full force. On the ground, Garush finally understood why the blue dragons had fled in panic. With their strength, going against Long Sleep Shrine's main force was simply sending themselves to their deaths. Sigh. Lord Howl sighed. He did not know what tone he should use to communicate with his son. He knew that his son hated him. Lord Howl of life. However, in the face of his son in trouble, in the face of the calamity of the clan that he had sacrificed his entire life for, he simply could not bear it. Roof. Dragon of. Duque did as he wished. The person was saved, but the person who was saved did not even say a word of thanks. Grom's heart must be very complicated. At this time, Grom raised his famous blood howl and shouted, "The blood of our brethren cannot be shed in vain. Today's grudge will be avenged today. Those who are still breathing, follow me to kill the demonic pivot and slaughter those treacherous blue dragons." Oh. Hundreds and thousands of people responded. As long as the beastmen could still fight, they simply bandaged their wounds and followed Grom to kill their way to the shore. The battle in the sky was destined to have nothing to do with the Warsong beastmen, but the Draconians and Draconians loyal to Maligos on the ground could be slaughtered to vent their anger. Grom had to do this. A defeated clan would definitely be looked down upon by the other beastmen clans. If he didn't want the clan that had given birth to him, raised him, and made him fight for his whole life to fall, he had to lead these defeated soldiers to pay blood for blood in the shortest time possible. Perhaps for a dead former chief, this was crossing the line. At this time, Grom's first consideration was the legacy of the clan, not the face of the son of the Warsong tribe's chief. When Grom reached out to his son with his right hand, he wanted to pull him up. Come. Slap. Garrush slapped his father's hand away. I can fight. I can get up myself. With that, Garrush gripped his battle axe and rushed to the front of the group. Warsong beastmen. Follow your chief forward. The Warsong beastmen all looked at Grom. When they saw Grom nod slightly, everyone followed Garrush's steps. This made Garrush feel even more ashamed. The shadow of Duque in the sky no longer looked at the Warsong beastmen. The shadow gradually became real. Duque's real body had already descended into the sky above the Northwind tundra. Beside him, several elemental emissaries stood in the air. At this time, Alexstrasza arrived. Alexstrasza, it's time to put an end to this. Okay. The Red Dragon Queen's huge head nodded slightly. Nothing saddened her more than her own flesh and blood killing each other. On the other side, Onyxia lowered her head slightly, revealing the back of her neck. As long as Duque nodded, a chair would appear on her dragon's back for Duque to sit on. Duque sent a telepathic message. Today isn't suitable. Onyxia, who no longer had any integrity, obviously didn't mind being Duque's mount as a dragon aspect. The other dragon aspects did. After all, this was a battle between the dragon aspects. Even Kalegos had stood up for him. If Malygos was proven not to have stepped into the realm of death, the dragon aspects would try to solve the problem through dialogue. If Malygos really did die, then before he became a bone dragon, no, a Dracolic even more terrifying than a dragon of death, the Dragon Slumber Temple would really have to destroy Malygos. Looking at the floating magic island standing on the western horizon, Duque was filled with emotion. He could restrict Malygos from obtaining the two major elements of ice and fire, but he couldn't do anything about the arcana. The arcana didn't come from the four major elements. As for the origin of the arcana, it was impossible to know. Arcana magic was more like the Pantheon's unique source magic. In theory, the arcana energy was an even more primitive energy. Since there wasn't a single arcana world, the mysterious arcana energy could never be cut off. With Malygos' ability, he could even infinitely convert the other elements in the world into arcana energy. Rather than using the magic net as an arena to fight an endless tug-of-war, it would be better to put all his chips on the line and eliminate Malygos in terms of material concepts, ending everything once and for all. Chapter 1588. O Malygos, I see that you have a fierce look on your face, and your bones aren't special. You're wearing a green grassland on your head and whatnot. His wife was ridden by Arthas as a mount, and even he had to be ridden by Second Fool. So dragon liches and bone dragons aren't suitable for you. Yes, birds. Ghost dragon not bad. Green ghost dragon king. High and mighty. Go go. Duque had already made up his mind to get rid of Malygos in the magic pivot. Otherwise it wouldn't be fun if Malygos and Arthas merged. After all, Malygos was also a king. If the two kings merged and Arthas really became an ice dragon knight, then the power would be too great. One had to know that this wasn't the concept of 1 + 1 = 2. It was equal to 3, equal to 4. Although Second Fool was strong, the lack of super powerful magic skills was a hurdle that he couldn't avoid with the Death Knight template. Once Malygos fell into the trap, the consequences would be unimaginable. Duque had to make the first move to gain the upper hand. For the army of the Sleeping Dragon Temple, the distance of 100 or 200 kilometers would only take a short while to kill. The magic pivot was the Blue Dragon Army's nest in the center of the Kodara Highlands in the northwest of the Northwind Tundra. It was surrounded by countless lightning-like arcane energy, and there were dark black ice buildings everywhere, as well as vertical icicles. Several ancient blue dragons led a small army of blue dragons, and hung outside the magic pivot. In front of the incomparably huge Sleeping Dragon Coalition army, These few hundred blue dragons weren't enough at all. Lady Alexstrasza, Lord Nozdormu, Lord Isera, Lord Onyxia, even if you have the status of dragon aspect, bringing a dragon army to the magic pivot is still an offense to the blue dragon army. The leading ancient dragon lowered his head slightly. Oligos. This is none of your business. Get Malygos to come out and see me. Otherwise, even if I have to dismantle the magic pivot, I will see him today. Alexstrasza didn't fall for it at all. She didn't give the ancient blue dragon any chance to play tricks. Duque squinted at the blue dragon and chuckled in his heart. In the original history, this guy lost the competition with Carrie and joined the Twilight Legion. In the end, he was stabbed in the back by Blackmore from another time and space, and his blood was used to activate the nuclear bomb, Focused Rainbow. Right now, Duque just smiled and didn't say anything. Half of the Blue Dragon Legion was frauds, while the other half was weaklings. Anyway, there were too many things to complain about. Duque didn't even know where to start. On the other side, facing the aggressive Red Dragon Queen, the three dragon aspects, and their own traitor, Kalegos, who was leading a group of opponents. Even Oligos couldn't handle it. Alright, I'll go ask His Majesty Malygos. Then a drama of slipping away was staged. Damn, when it flew away, even its tail was drooping. Originally, Duque didn't think that Malygos would come out. In Duque's imagination, anyone with a bit of brain would choose to escape directly, or even kidnap a large number of blue dragons to escape to the Iceground Glacier. But he didn't know if it was because Arthas didn't completely control Malygos, or because he simply gave a mental hint and didn't make a move. The entire magic pivot suddenly shook violently. The surrounding clouds were all shaken away by this surging arcane energy. After a burst of dazzling purple-blue arcane energy blossomed like a flower, a huge blue dragon flew out from the magic gate of the magic pivot. Roar! He didn't know if Malygos' high IQ was driving him, or if his soul was still stuck in the past 10,000 years ago. Thinking that he was still the lord of all things, the dragon aspect that was regarded as holy by all creatures. Anyway, being stared at by that pair of golden vertical pupils, Duque didn't feel anything. Instead, he seemed to be smiling. Malygos opened his mouth and revealed his fangs. Haha, my brothers and sisters. Are you also here to witness this despicable person who blasphemed the holy domain of magic, the self-proclaimed demigod of the weave, Duke Marcus, commit suicide in front of me? Duque was instantly out of character. Please forgive Duque. Even though he was the best actor from the 1st to the 26th Azeroth Dark Portal, Duque still had the urge to quit acting. Alexstrasza wanted to say something, but Duque interrupted. Malygos, do you recognize what this is? With that, Duque raised the thing in his hand high, and then Duque slowly flew towards Malygos under the support of the wind element. Oh. Malygos looked at Duque coldly. He stared coldly at the thing in Duque's hand. Although he knew at first glance that he didn't recognize it, he enjoyed the feeling of looking down at the tiny Duque. After a while he replied slowly, I don't recognize it. What's wrong with it? Duque wasn't annoyed. This thing is called a soul casket. It contains the soul of the great Draenei Holy Light Teacher. Perhaps you don't know, but he was the one who fought against the two Burning Legion commanders, Archimonde and Kil'jaeden, 25,000 years ago. He was one of the three giants of Eredar. Huh. The indifferent Malygos still didn't know what he was facing. On the contrary, the dragon face that still looked lively had an expression of waiting to watch a show. Seeing this, Duque didn't want to continue acting. Duque shouted, If you've fallen, then please accept the punishment of the holy light. As soon as he finished speaking, the soul box suddenly emitted a brilliant golden light. The dazzling divine radiance instantly covered the entire magic core area. It was as bright as the rising sun, but the entire sleeping dragon legion, and almost all the blue dragons didn't feel anything. Holy light was a typical holy spiritual energy. It didn't do any harm to the righteous formation, or even the neutral. Instead, those with good intentions would be encouraged and enjoy additional combat power. 99% of the dragons were fine. Except for one dragon, the great king of magic, Malygos. Wah, despicable humans. You, what did you do to me? The Blue Dragon King, which was almost half the size of a town, flapped his wings desperately. The arcane energy swirling under his wings was like illusory colorful clouds. When the colorful clouds formed turbulence and dissipated in the air, the sparks of arcane light had already formed arcane missiles of different sizes. When these highly concentrated arcane missiles landed on the ground, the entire open space in front of the magic core region was bombarded by elemental missiles. There were terrifying continuous explosions everywhere. In the sky, the giant dragons that were hovering were all stunned. Many of the giant dragons almost forgot to flap their wings and fell. Every dragon could clearly see that there was a huge decaying wound on Malago's chest. Chapter 1589. The circular wound was so huge. Putting aside the dark aura around the wound, just the size of the wound alone was enough for a carriage to run through. Even giant dragons were shocked to see it. In the eyes of the blue dragons who followed Malagos, their boss chest had only lost a scale and left a sword mark. In the eyes of the dragons, this injury was no different from a mosquito bite for a human. It was not a big deal. However, in front of Old Man Valen's ultra-pure holy light, all concealment was meaningless. The dark power of Frostmourne had not only pierced through Malagos' chest, but also his heart. The Blue Dragon King had actually died the moment it was stabbed. It was purely the heart that continued to move under the drive of the dark power, maintaining Malagos' life on the surface. Arthas also very cunningly did not let his power seep into Malagos' blood. He only captured the Dragon King's heart and affected Malagos' will. Malagos, who was already seriously deranged, did not even realize that he had been manipulated. He thought that it was a decision made by his own will. If not for Duque's holy light at the beginning, the kind-hearted Alexstrasza might have really been fooled by Malagos. She might have thought that her brother was just having a mental episode again, and not betraying the path of guardians. Holy light and the power of shadow were never compatible. Perhaps it was possible to transform holy light and shadow like Duque, but there was no way they could exist in the same place at the same time. Malagos still seemed to be alive on the surface, but in reality, he had already stepped into the realm of death. Under the holy light, it directly melted, revealing the dark heart that was in intense conflict with the power of holy light but still beating. Wow. Even if he is a dragon king, with such an injury, I'm afraid. On the surface, Onyxia was concerned about Malagos. The Black Dragon Princess, who did not have a good nature, was not interested in this emotional world. She was actually indirectly reminding Alexstrasza and the other two dragons that it was time to work. Shock, sadness, heartache. She did not want to admit this was the truth, but she had already experienced cruel betrayal once. Malagos' passive betrayal made Alexstrasza feel better. Oh, he was actually forced. He fell for the Lich King's tricks and sorcery. Nozdormu was the first to accept reality. As the space-time Dragon King, he had seen countless futures. In those divergent branches of history, Malagos had died for no reason, and looked for his own *T so many times that he was too lazy to complain. As the space-time guardian appointed by Titan, he had to maintain absolute silence. Even if my heart is bitter, I can't spoil it. Nozdormu was a little surprised to see Malagos become like this in the main timeline, but he was more relaxed. Killing a brother who was already dead was much less of a psychological burden than beating him to death. Isra sighed. My brother, let me help you free yourself from this crazy nightmare. Although Alexstrasza was reluctant, as the leader of the Pentashade Dragons, she had the self-awareness of being a role model. She raised her head, and her voice spread across the sky. Malagos, my brother, I feel very sorry for what you have gone through. However, the duties that the Titans have entrusted me with make it so that I have no choice but to announce that the Dragon Slumber Temple has officially relieved you of your duties as the Guardian Dragon. Next, we will purify you as a blasphemer. Accept the divine punishment and rest your soul in peace. Malagos was in a mess in the wind. In fact, he was the one who suffered the biggest blow. What happened to the King of Magic? How did he suddenly go from a high and mighty guardian dragon to a street rat that everyone hated? The determination of his brothers and sisters, the various ancient dragons who were originally doubtful but now had firm eyes. and the blue dragon subordinates who were originally obedient were retreating. He had always felt that the whole world revolved around him, but now he suddenly felt that the whole world was full of hostility towards him. Malygos was already a little crazy, and now he was even more unable to accept reality. Why? This was Malygos's question to himself, and also to his former brothers and sisters. Alexstrasza's eyes were full of sadness. Malygos used to be such a positive and optimistic blue dragon. It was hard to look back now. My little brother, come to think of it, your glory ended 10,000 years ago. Yes, since 10,000 years ago, when the arrogant Malygos was severely weakened, he still did not hesitate to cooperate with almost the entire Blue Dragon army to take revenge on Nesario. Everything was destined. Destined madness, confusion, and the end of the road. Either this or that would always lead the mentally ill Malygos to the end of the road. Alexstrasza couldn't help but sigh at this cursed fate. It was not that Duque did not remind her, but she was always emotional and blinded by family. The Red Dragon Queen roared at the sky. That was the order to attack the entire Sleeping Dragon Coalition army. Kalegos's performance was brilliant. He rushed to the Blue Dragons who were still loyal to Malygos and shouted, "My fellow Blue Dragons, our king is long dead. He is already a slave of the Lich King. If you don't want to become a zombie dragon and be buried with him, surrender immediately. Lower your altitude, lie on the ground, and show the emblem of the Sleeping Dragon Temple." This was the Blue Dragon version of giving up and not killing. Perhaps King Malygos had broken the hearts of his subordinates in the past 10,000 years. If it was not for the fact that he had participated in the killing of Nesario, not many Blue Dragons would have taken him seriously. Now that the old king was dead and had become a slave of the Lich King, naturally, not many Blue Dragons would be loyal to him. They were even more cowardly than stray dogs. They quickly dropped to the ground and lowered their noble heads to the Sleeping Dragon Coalition army, which represented the supreme force of the Sleeping Dragon Temple. No, I'm not dead. I'm still alive. My heart is still beating. Why are you all looking at me like that? In the sky, facing the 4 dragon aspects that surrounded him, Malygos was still arguing with himself in a neurotic manner. At this moment, an evil and vast will suddenly descended. He had the deepest aura of death, the coldest will, and the most evil and cold voice. He was of course the mastermind behind this, Lich King Arthas. A huge illusory had appeared behind Malygos. Malygos, from the moment you came to the Ice Throne, you were my possession. Yes, you are already dead. It is I, the great Lich King, who personally granted you eternal death. Arthas, whose face was covered by a blue-black ice helmet, only had his 2 blue eyes flickering. Chapter 1590. No. Impossible. I only suffered a small injury. Malygos used his claws to dig at his chest in vain, as if he wanted to dig out all the rotten flesh there. However, his claws had only touched the edge of the black heart when his body twitched in pain, as if he had been electrocuted. Idiot. Still not accepting reality? Arthas was a little tired of facing such a deranged fellow. On the other hand, if Malygos was not in such a state, he would not have been able to capture a Dragon King so easily, even with the home advantage of the Ice Throne. At first he seemed to be a little angry, but then Arthas sneered. Forget it, you've already failed. Then I'll take back what belongs to me. In any case, no matter what, victory will only belong to me, the Lich King Arthas. Following Arthas' declaration, Malygos suddenly let out an earth-shattering scream. No, it should be called Death Wail. That was the resentment towards his inexplicable death, the resentment towards all living beings. This kind of howl on the soul level, even as strong as the guardian dragons were momentarily stunned and unable to move forward. Malygos' dragon body was changing at a speed visible to the naked eye. On the black heart that was clearly visible in the rotting hole in his chest, the aura of death that had been nurtured for a long time pulsed at high speed to every corner of his body. The beautiful blue scales that had been as blue as the sea on a clear day became snow-white, a paleness that symbolized bones and death. The dragon skin that relied on flesh and blood to support it shriveled, and the originally bulging dragon body instantly became thin. In all of Malygos' joints, White bone spurs broke through the tough dragon skin and grew out. The once gorgeous blue dragon king had turned into a ferocious and terrifying monster of death in just 10 breaths of time. At the same time, his control over magic power did not degenerate with the passing of his life. The entire magic pivot responded to his summons and bloomed with even more dazzling arcane light. Not only that, in the lower part of the magic pivot, a large number of monsters rushed out. Everyone looked and was shocked to find that not only were there dead dragonmen and half-dragonmen, there were even dozens of blue dragons that had long since become corpses. Oligos exclaimed, "By the Titans!" Maligos said he sent them out on a mission. At this moment, there was a commotion at the back of the dragon slumber shrine. A violent snowstorm suddenly appeared in the sky. Needless to say, this was definitely the work of the Lich King. More importantly, taking advantage of this snowstorm, the eyes of the hundreds of blue dragons that should have died long ago on the North Wind Tundra battlefield suddenly blossomed with a fierce blue light. Flapping their battered bodies, they flew into the sky and fiercely attacked the sleeping Dragon Alliance army. Allego's dragon face turned pale. Heavens! His Majesty, no. Maligos rewarded us with some delicious meat after he returned. Ugh. He was already forcing himself to vomit. Plague was the specialty of the Scourge army. In the past, Kel'Thuzad had used the plague to turn the Rotterdam kingdom into corpses. Now his target had changed from humans to dragons. No one knew if Maligos was conscious or subconsciously manipulated to poison the blue dragon under him. Anyway, it was an indisputable fact that the blue dragons that had died on the battlefield had all turned into corpse dragons. At this moment, Duque suddenly understood why Maligos still slapped the red dragon Christesa so hard in this life. Maligos didn't know that he had stepped into a land of death, but his survival instinct still drove him to leave descendants for himself. The Red Dragon clan was a clan that represented life. It was probably because of this instinct that he pushed Christesa forcefully. Sigh. Duque sighed. Looking at the corpse dragon Maligos that had started to go crazy, Duque couldn't help but feel pity for him. A pitiful dragon must have something hateful about him. Everything was a cycle of karma, retribution. The scene became chaotic. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Arthas gave Maligos a death order. Maligos, my mount, come back. Your mission is complete. Originally, Arthas' idea was to get the benefits first. As long as the corpse dragon Maligos safely returned to Iceground Fortress, the strength of the Calamity army would definitely increase greatly. Unfortunately, just as Alexstrasza underestimated Maligos' mental illness, Arthas also underestimated Maligos' ego and arrogance. Perhaps in Arthas's imagination Maligos, whose soul had already been captured by him, would listen to his orders and escape during the chaos. In reality, Maligos had gone crazy. Duke Marcus, it's all your fault. Maligos, who had already transformed into a death dragon, didn't take the opportunity to escape. Instead, he charged at Duque. Ha! The dumbfounded Duque felt like he had been implicated. The next second, Duque laughed. Let's just say that he laughed out of extreme anger. Me too. I actually took a lunatic seriously. If I took it seriously, I would have lost. A spiraling golden flame rose from Duque's raised right hand. It was the officially named Song of Light and Darkness, a personal artifact of Duque. The holy golden sword was raised high. Bystanders could only see the golden light shining on the tip of the sword. But as the King of Time, Nosdormu saw something else. Time passed quickly. The scene before him seemed to have happened in a future that he, as the Bronze Dragon King, did not know. After Duque pulled out the sword, what he was about to do was to return the fate of Maligos' death to its original position in a strange trajectory. Nosdormu looked at this scene in shock. Time was still flowing, but it returned all cause and effect, leading the entire world to a brand new future. What kind of power was this? Or was what he saw purely an illusion of a tributary of time? Before Nosdormu or the other two veteran dragon aspects could react, Duque had already activated the special effect of the sword. Demon Slayer. It was not inferior to the golden light released by Valen at all. The holy light made Maligos feel a tingling sensation all over his body. His weakened nerves and lost dragon body would not feel pain. It was pain on the level of the soul. This pain brought him a strange feeling, and he suddenly fell into a trance. At this moment, Malygos heard a cracking sound in the air. He raised his dragon head and found that the arcane energy he was so proud of had actually solidified, forming a strange blue solid substance that looked like dough. It floated in the air. Chapter 1591. Only then did Malygos notice that the solid arcane elements that looked like pieces of plasticine were surrounded by white mist that emitted a cold aura. The arcane elements were divided and wrapped by the frost elements, turning into strange purple-blue ice particles that rustled down from the sky. At some point, a piece of white frost was climbing up Malygos's right paw. Ice instantly formed in the gaps between his fingers that he didn't notice. It wasn't until he accidentally moved his toes that he realized that his legs were creaking. As soon as he opened his toes, there was the sound of ice shattering. The former Blue Dragon King was shocked. This situation made him realize the seriousness of the situation. He finally realized that he was losing control of all the elements. He subconsciously and pessimistically believed that his power had greatly declined. In fact, he was really wrong this time. As the King of Magic, how could his control of the elements decline so easily? However, the magic circuit was a derivative of the soul. A moment ago, Malygos had officially gone from a half-living state to a pure dead person. His soul was undergoing a drastic qualitative change. In fact, although the magnitude of this qualitative change was great, the process was quite short. As long as he calmed down and quickly found a new soul sense, he could regain his combat power, as long as he found a way to manipulate magic power in the soul state. Didn't you see how Anastrian, the Sun King, was very good at fighting when he first became a lich? The funny thing was that thinking too much was also a kind of psychopath. Psychopaths couldn't help but let their imagination run wild. Arthas had tried to preserve Malygos' spirit as much as possible in order to make him a death knight like Nazul had trained him to be. Now it seemed more like a bad move. Psychopaths were double-edged swords. In Malygos' imagination, since Duque could cut off his sources of frost and fire elements, he should be able to cut off his arcane elements. As a result, when Duque attacked, he foolishly gave up control of the arcane elements. The process was so smooth that even Duque was surprised. He would be a bastard not to take advantage of it. Duque accepted the control of the arcane elements that Malygos gave up without hesitation. The group of blue dragons, no matter which faction they belonged to, all looked at Duque, who was in midair, as if they had seen a ghost. Even though the King of Magic, whom they once worshipped and obeyed, was still in midair, they could not suppress the fear rising from the depths of their hearts. If he didn't know that Duque was a close ally of the Dragon Slumber Shrine, perhaps even Kalegos would have hurriedly backed away from Duque. Duque was too terrifying. Even in the face of the oldest King of Magic in the world of Azeroth, he could still seize control of all elements in an instant. Without magical elements, the mighty King of Magic was nothing more than an undead dragon with a slightly stronger physical body. The purest ice element surrounded Duque's body. Due to the strong winds beneath his feet, the chill that emanated from Duque's body was so intense that even the ordinary dragons that were slightly closer to him could not withstand it, and flapped their wings to leave. Onyxia looked at her master in surprise. This was the first time she had seen Duque like this. In her impression, Duque was like a modest gentleman most of the time. Although he was more ruthless than anyone else in crucial moments, he rarely displayed such a threatening aura. Perhaps this was the so-called fight of the same origin. There was only one origin. If you took more, I would naturally take less. In the past, they were in the same trench, so Duque could not make a move. The situation now was completely different. Not only did Duque want to be ruthless, but he also wanted to take half of the origin of the next Blue Dragon King. Duque, who was familiar with history, obviously knew what kind of person the next Blue Dragon King, Kalegos, was. Apart from his appearance, whether it was before or after inheriting the title of Dragon Aspect, this fellow was a complete trash. If Onyxia could be said to be a low-level version of the Dragon Aspect, then Kalegos was used to make up the numbers. Duque did not want to divide the power of the magic net into dragons or mortals. The magic net is mine, and I have the final say. Use it if you want, or scram if you don't. Hence, Duke's sword was not only to kill Malygos, who had submitted to the Lich King. It was also to seize the authority of the Blue Dragon King in Azeroth. Malygos' hoarse voice seemed to come from the depths of the icy hell under the frozen throne. His blue eyes glared at Duke, and he gritted his teeth as he roared. I knew you were a despicable thief. You stole the elemental authority that belonged to me. Alexstrasza, look at what you've done. You raised a despicable person who stole the power of the dragon aspect. The Red Dragon Queen was stunned. Even she was speechless at this crazy dragon who did not even know his own position. You, Malygos, are already the servant of the Lich King, and you're still calling me a thief? Damn thief. Very well, I, Malygos, will let you have a good taste of my anger. Duke could not listen to it anymore. He put his sword behind his back, and when he got into a forward stabbing posture, there was a flash of holy golden light. The next second, Malygos screamed. When he raised his dragon claws, he suddenly realized that something was wrong with his body. His dragon body was strangely dislocated, and his upper body flew out as he pounced. The lower half of his body seemed to be fixed in place by a spell that stopped time, not moving at all. Crack. There was a crisp sound. Miraculously, all the dragons saw a golden spot of light appear on Malygos' waist. The spot of light quickly became a horizontal line parallel to the ground, and it continued to extend to the left and right. At the same time, with Malygos as the starting point, there was a golden line that connected Malygos' back to his lair, the magic pivot behind him. The golden line pierced straight into the huge Blue Dragon Legion's encampment. In the next moment, the golden line swung to the left and right, and then a ripple line appeared in the void. This line swept across Malygos' dragon lair, and with the golden line as the boundary, everything broke in the middle on the spot. There was a soft crack, and at the same time, it split into two halves, from top to bottom. Time seemed to have frozen. The word astonishment was written on every dragon's face. Malygos' dragon face was full of horror. Like a female dragon that had been raped, he screamed, "No!" because he realized that he had not only lost his body and power, but also the unique rule of Azeroth that was originally under his control. This was what he valued the most. Chapter 1592. To be honest, would Duke be afraid of Malygos? How was that possible? Even if the Blue Dragon King was at full strength, Duke would not be afraid at all. What had always restrained Duke was his good relationship with Alexstrasza and Isra. The Temple of Dragon's Slumber had always been the first line of defense against the Burning Legion. If not for this relationship, after Duke became a demigod, he would have taught the crazy Malygos how to be a qualified dragon aspect. Come to think of it, even if Duke went all out under normal circumstances, he still would not be able to kill Malygos in a second. After all, he was a dragon aspect that had been blessed by the divine power of the Titans. The reason why he was able to split Malygos in half in one move was that Malygos had courted death himself. More importantly, the former Blue Dragon King was not used to his current situation at all. From his body, to his mind, to his soul. The disorder in his soul caused him to temporarily lose control of the arcane elements. He had the entire magic core that had stored 25,000 years worth of energy, but he could not use even a little bit of it. The disorder in his body was because he was not aware of it. He did not realize that he had changed from a righteous creature to an evil undead creature. Needless to say, he didn't even realize who was his master now. He did not understand, did not accept Earthy's kindness to save him, and instead dug his own grave. Everything added together formed this exaggerated scene before them. The dragons all thought that Duke had only caught the last train in God's domain, and that he still needed a long time to cultivate. However, Duke had actually killed the king of magic Malygos with a single move. Shock. Shock. Before Alexstrasza had recovered from the car accident in her emotional world, she had to face another shocking reality. Duke might already have the strength to stand on equal footing with her. Perhaps it could be attributed to luck, planning, and execution. But as the Red Dragon who had been watching Duke since the second battle at the Dark Portal, until now and watched Duke's growth and rise, no one in the dragon race knew Duke better than her. Even so, She still felt that she had underestimated Duque. Originally, they had predicted that there would be an earth-shattering battle. After all, the other party was a powerhouse and had the advantage of defending their territory. Who would have thought that gathering so many dragons and gathering the other 3 5-colored guardian dragons at the demonic pivot would result in such an unexpected outcome? It was as if all the dragons flying in the sky had become witnesses to the battle between Duque and Malygos over the origin of magic. Arthas, the Lich King, who had been sitting on her ice throne and watching the drama unfold, suddenly stood up in shock. After a long time, she finally managed to squeeze out 3 words. Damn it! As long as Malygos wasn't so stupid as to turn into a dragon and come under him. Not only could he spy on the higher level of the magical laws of this world, but he could also cause a real rift in the hearts of the dragon aspects. He even fantasized about the day when he could use the cracks in their hearts to make all the dragon aspects fall. This was not impossible. In front of them was Nethario, the Wing of Death, and behind them was Malygos, the King of Magic. Who could guarantee that the other 3 dragon aspects wouldn't fall? But now, because of Malygos' temporary stupidity, all of Arthas' plans were ruined. Bastard! If I had known, I wouldn't have set up so many schemes. I would have just taken him as a mount. Just as Arthas was throwing a tantrum, Malygos was actually putting on a clumsy performance, acting dumb. Oh, no. Duke Marcus, you despicable mortal, what did you do to me? Do you know that you are guilty of the most heinous crimes? Malygos spat like a resentful woman as he waved his front claws to grab his lower body that was falling from midair. In a futile attempt to reattach his lower body. Was this crazy dragon really not here to be funny? If the atmosphere wasn't so serious, Onyxia would probably have laughed out loud on the spot. Duque used holy light to activate the Song of Light and Shadow in his hand and broke Malygos' spine with one strike. It could be said that the key joints of the entire dragon's body were all holy light. Unless Malygos could cross the line between life and death and turn himself back into a living dragon of the Order faction, it would be impossible to reattach his body before the remaining holy light energy was cleared. Originally, whether it was Duque or the 4 dragon aspects, they should have taken advantage of his weakness to take his life. An unexpected situation disrupted all of Alexstrasza's plans. After the dragon aspect's holy blessing was removed from the insane Malygos, all the exclusive laws that the Titans had bestowed upon him should have been taken away. Now, because his soul and body had unexpectedly collapsed prematurely, dazzling light burst forth from his body, and countless shining Titan runes flowed out. Alexstrasza turned pale with fright. Not good. Malygos, hurry up and gather these runes. If you lose the inheritance of these runes, you will lose the mystery of the Void Protection Matrix. Malygos was stunned. He hesitated for a full 3 seconds before he reacted under Alexstrasza's urging. The structure of the dragon race was very strange. Within any dragon race, there was no such thing as a second brother or a second sister. After the dragon aspect, there were a bunch of ancient dragons. Even among the weaker black dragons and blue dragons in Dragonding, there were still 8 to 10 ancient dragons of this level. To be honest, Malygos was not mentally and physically prepared to inherit the name of the dragon aspects. First of all, he was not strong enough. He had all sorts of weak performances, and it was almost impossible for him not to be seen as the shame of the blue dragons. Secondly, he raised the flag against Malygos purely because he felt that it was wrong to gather all the mana in the world for the dragon weave to use. Moreover, he was the most handsome of the dragon race. Not only did a female dragon like Martagosa love him so much that she was willing to go through fire and water for him, there were also many ancient dragons who liked him. Anyway, the group of blue dragons had been unhappy with Malygos' madness for a long time, so they might as well make a big deal out of it. With Alexstrasza backing him up, there was nothing to be afraid of. They had thought that this would be a grand negotiation or something. Who knew that things would take a turn for the worse? And Malygos was actually already a dead dragon. Even his position as a dragon aspect would be forcibly removed. Malygos did indeed have the qualifications to inherit the Blue Dragon King's position, but he was not prepared enough. As soon as he came up, his limbs were in a mess, and he almost instinctively grabbed at the floating Titan runes. Seeing the group of dragon aspects want to die, they were all speechless. When she saw Kalegos accidentally shatter a Titan rune, Alexstrasza finally said, "Duque, go and help out." Chapter 1593. Picking up scraps? Was he trying to put a mouse in a rice jar? The serious and sanctimonious hypocrite Dumuk did a good job of concealing his inner joy. No. If he were to be serious and show his joy on his face, wouldn't he be laughed at? This was a great benefit. If the power of the four elements could still be explored by oneself and reverse-engineered methods and magic formulas, then the high-level laws of the arcane were really not something that could be easily obtained. The magic that came out of the dragon race in the past was already a very rare emasculated version. After 25,000 years of development, some had been lost, and some had been changed beyond recognition by later generations. If he wanted to get his hands on the primordial laws, he had to work on Malagoth. Under normal circumstances, the Titan runes that had exploded would definitely not be touched by Duque. Unfortunately, the successor was not strong enough. The pentashade dragon aspect only corresponded to one type of law, and the other dragon aspects could not touch the Titan runes of the magic type at all. But the Dragon Sleep Temple could not just let the Titan runes scatter everywhere. This was an even bigger matter than the betrayal of the dragon aspects. If there was a traitor, they would just have to kill him. Losing the runes was a great crime for the Dragon Sleep Temple. Although the Titans had not returned to Azeroth for more than 20,000 years, a group of Titan Guardians still faithfully performed their duties. Not to mention those far away, just an order next door, there were several guys who were at the same level, or even half a level higher than the dragon aspects. Once the blame was placed, even Alexstrasza would not be able to bear it. Duque was a guardian recognized by the soul of Azeroth, after all, so it could barely be considered as a leak. In any case, other than glaring at him, the four dragon aspects could only charge over like a swarm of bees. They would first get rid of Malygos, who was foolishly playing with his corpse puzzle, and leave the easy pickings to Duke. Duke could disdain to do lowly things like plucking feathers from geese and robbing people while passing by. Was there a need for Duque to take away some of the Titan runes? Nonsense. If they could just make a copy of the instance dungeon, why did they have to make it so ugly? In the eyes of a bystander, every single Titan rune was made up of thousands of smaller runes that were pieced together in an irregular manner to form a unique magic circuit, which then became a fixed law that was equivalent to the origin of magic in this world. The Titan runes were so complicated that it would take an ordinary mage 8 to 10 years to study a single rune. Was Duque an ordinary mage? Stop joking. With the help of the system elf, Duque had long since started researching and analyzing the Titan runes. With the foundation of observing the four great guardians in Alkavon's treasury, Duque already had a deep understanding of the Titan runes. He also had hundreds of millions of contingency plans in the system. All he had to do now was to compare that part of the runes with Malygos runes, and deduce the possible magical laws and reactions. On the other side, two of the four dragon aspects were tearing up, while the other two were expressionlessly dismembering the dead Malygos. It was only a matter of time before Malygos, who only had half of his body left, was dismembered. Even a fool could not save him. On the other side, Duque was happily picking up the runes. On the other side, Kael'thas had a bitter look on his face. The Titan runes were not something that could be picked up just by touching them. Every Titan rune contained its own unique law. If different types of elements or existences touched it, the rune would trigger a self-destruction system and collapse on its own. On the contrary, touching the corresponding law or element would slow down the reaction and become peaceful. However, this was only temporary. In order to truly return the runes to their original position, there needed to be a qualified carrier to engrave all the Titan runes into a powerful soul of a specific attribute. However, he suddenly realized that not only was his efficiency low, but his soul's ability to carry the Titan runes was also far from enough. As it turned out, Duque's work was even smoother than his. Left with no choice, Kael'thas shouted, "Your Majesty Alexstrasza, I can't carry all the Titan runes. Can Sir Marcus help me carry some of them?" Red, green, and bronze, the three different skin colors of the dragon aspect's eyes bulged at the same time. It was a spectacular scene. It was fine to let Duque try it out. Your F***king successor can't even carry the complete inheritance. What are you doing? Alexstrasza, who had never been particularly good-tempered, could only suppress her anger and asked, "What do the other dragon aspects think?" Nosdormu. It doesn't matter. Onyxia. Ditto. Isra. That's the only way. The red dragon sister glared at the useless successor Kael'kas, then turned to Duque and shouted, "Duque, please take care of the Titan runes for a while until Kael'kas recovers. Then, please transfer them back to Kael'kas." "No problem. I swear I won't peek at the Titan runes belonging to the blue dragons." Just as Duque finished swearing, there was a sudden clap of thunder in the distant sky. Boom. A white light split the sky in the west. Duque didn't believe it. "As long as Sir Kael'kas needs it, I will send the runes back at any time." Rumble. Two bolts of lightning appeared in the north and south at the same time. "I, Duke Marcus, swear in the name of the demigod of the Azeroth weave." Rumble, 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 rumble. Lightning and thunder rumbled endlessly. Damn it. Which fellow Taoist is undergoing tribulation here? "Get the hell out of my sight." That was what he said in his heart. But in fact, Duque flew towards the larger Titan runes that had a heavier burden on the soul. Small runes? Hee, this young master's system can analyze them in an instant, and I still have to pick them up a second time? The pure Kael'kas didn't know. How could he know that Duque was this strong? All he could see was Duke shouldering the heavy burden, and using his powerful soul to carry the large Titan runes. He was so touched that tears almost came out of his eyes. When he focused on picking up the small runes, his efficiency was greatly increased. One man and one dragon. They used the overflowing elements to maintain the floating Titan runes as much as possible. Then they temporarily absorbed them one by one and fixed them on their souls. It took more than an hour for them to finish. During this time, the tens of thousands of giant dragons of the Sleeping Dragon Alliance surrounded this area as bodyguards. They couldn't go anywhere. On the other hand, on the ground, Lord Howl led the Warsong tribe's beastmen to kill the dead Draconians and Dragon Men. Maligos? That guy would have been torn apart long ago. Of course, his soul couldn't be captured. From the moment he was stabbed, the core of his soul was left in Frostmourne. Perhaps the next time they met, he could become a dragon soul lich. Chapter 1594. Kalecgos, who had only managed to pick up a small portion of the Titan rune, finally smiled. The human-like smile on his dragon face had charmed the female dragon fans. Unfortunately, his big sister, Alexstrasza, was not happy. "Noob. How could you be so complacent after obtaining such a small result? Could you at least have some ambition?" Although she did not say it out loud, that was what the red dragon sis meant. "Sister, don't be angry. There's nothing we can do about it. Give Kalecgos some time. Maybe he'll be better." Isra used a soft voice to persuade his sister. "Sigh. Each generation is worse than the last. When Kalecgos can be half as good as Duque, I'll have nothing to worry about. Look at that little rascal." In Du's eyes, the red dragon sis expression was clearly saying, "You're the worst batch of students I've ever taught." Of course, Duque pretended not to see her piercing gaze. After getting such a great deal, he did not show off and instead angered the dragon. Looking at the system notification, Duque was overjoyed. "You've obtained Anti-Gravity Arcane Energy Thruster Initial Model. You've obtained Arcane Beam Cannon Spell Model." Although these things were from 25,000 years ago, they were still considered black technology in the present day. The most frightening thing about technology and magic was the lack of inheritance. With these Titan technologies, even if they were incomplete, Duque could still make a lot of good things. As for the red dragon sis' resentful gaze, there are so many ants today. Oh, there's even a Voldemort. The gentlemanly Duque opened the magic mirror right under the red dragon sis' nose and looked directly at the ants on the tundra hundreds of meters below him. Humph. The red dragon sis did not have a temper anymore. "Let's go back. Matagosa. Kalecgos still needs some time to digest the inheritance of the previous guardian. Take care of the magic pivot for him during this time. Understood, Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Matagosa nodded. A huge internal war among the dragons ended with the destruction of Malygos. Although it seemed a little anticlimactic, it at least prevented the already weak blue dragon army from further weakening. The adult blue dragons, dragon whelps, and dragon whelps had all been used as cannon fodder after Malygos had ordered them to attack the Alliance and Horde forces. This was the best way to preserve the Alliance's strength. In theory, as long as reproduction was encouraged, it would not be a dream for the Dragon Kingdom to prosper in a few hundred, or even 1,000 years. Duque, who had obtained the greatest benefit, really wanted to hide and properly digest Malygos' relics. Even now that he had become a demigod, it was a very tiring task to calculate the usage of the Titan runes and the eternal laws within it with the system elves, which were almost equivalent to supercomputers. Blessings never come in pairs, but misfortune never comes alone. This old saying made sense. Just as Earthes was stirring up trouble everywhere and disrupting the rhythm of the northern expedition, something happened to Oder as well. Oder was always mentioned in the same breath as Odin and Odaman. Uldur was the Titan's third base in Azeroth. It was now controlled by the storm giants and their servants, the crystal golems. That was indeed the case on the surface. After Duque publicly announced that Loken, the guardian of the Church of Wisdom, was a traitor, the Dragon Sleep Temple had long regarded the entire Oder as a snake and a scorpion. Once they were free, they would beat him up. Dealing with Earthes the blasphemer was as important as dealing with Yogg-Saron, the enemy of the Titans. As soon as Malygos was dealt with, Oder sent a message. This time, it was Torim, the Titan guardian of the Church of Storm, who contacted the Dragon Sleep Temple to ask for help. Duque narrowed his eyes after hearing the news. If Oder, which had never been disturbed by the outside world, developed as it had in history, Torim, the Storm Guardian, should still be normal at this point in time. However, Torim's development was not going well. Originally, when Torim's wife died in history, he initially thought that it was the doing of the Storm Giant, but then he discovered the real culprit, his former colleague Loken. Knowing that he would be greatly weakened if he left the Temple of Storm, he still went to the Temple of Wisdom to get even with Loken. Then, of course, not only did he fail, he was also raped. He was thrown into Oder by Loken to give Yogg-Saron all kinds of hardcore training play. Later, he became Oder's boss, and even his mount was given by Loken to King Vrykul, Imran. It was a classic case of losing everything. Duque had a good impression of this loyal Titan guardian. After all, a man who could risk his life to avenge his wife could be called a real man. In fact, Duque still remembered when he finished a series of Torim's missions in the game, and saw Torim being captured. After that, when he attacked Oder and saw Torim's wife, Heave, standing beside him, Duque was touched for a moment. The guardian had already fallen. If he could reunite with his beloved wife, perhaps this would also be a kind of poignant happiness. Unfortunately, Duque was fed a mouthful of poisonous milk powder. That Heave was actually a female demon in disguise. Because even if Torim was contaminated by Yogg-Saron, a part of his will still couldn't be distorted, and he still missed his wife Heave, in the deepest part of his heart. As a last resort, Loken found a female demon for him to pretend to be his wife, and sent her to Torim as a mascot. The guardian fell at the feet of the players. But every player's heart was heavy. After witnessing the end of a tragic love, they didn't feel that this was a victory worth showing off at all. Fortunately, in this life, after personally participating in the general trend of Azeroth, Duque had the opportunity to change everything with his own hands. After receiving Torim's message, Duque immediately sent out his messenger. The Temple of the Storm was a temple located west of Oder, standing on the peak of a snowy mountain. It was surrounded by lightning all year round, and ordinary creatures didn't even have the right to approach the peak. At this moment, the giant sitting on the huge throne suddenly let out an "oh." The slightly wrinkled eyebrows instantly relaxed, and a smile appeared on his thick lips. In front of the temple, on the huge platform, there was a continuous flash of lightning. The densely packed thunderbolts hung down like curtains, forming an impenetrable vertical net. At this time, several clusters of lightning twisted in the middle, revealing a small hole. In the middle of the hole, an arcane energy that didn't belong to the nature element began to spread. At first, it was just an inconspicuous small dot. In less than a second, it spread into a portal that could allow one person to pass through. A very young human-like existence stepped out of the portal. He strode toward the temple. Chapter 1595. Actually, this human was not walking slowly. Unfortunately, the temple was too huge. After all, the entire temple was built according to the size of a titan. The majesty in the titan's eyes was already so great that it seemed boundless to humans. Just from the high platform outside the temple to the side door of the temple, which could not be called the main door, was 3 times 3, which was the size of 9 football fields. He estimated that from the portal to the front of Tarim's throne, it was about 5 kilometers. Guys who played with storms and lightning were never slow. The giant sitting on the throne snapped his fingers, and a blanket made of lightning appeared at the feet of the little human. The lightning did not hurt the human at all. Instead, it was like a mount, carrying the human at high speed to Tarim's throne. The lightning circled behind the giant, as docile as a tabby cat. Other than the occasional crackling sound of electricity, there was no excess energy or damage. The giant spoke. I, Tarim, the guardian of storms, specially sent a message to the dragon's slumber temple. Why is it an empty shell with no content? The young human smiled and bowed. You can call me Mark Dooku, the man who destroyed Sargera's largest fortress in the Twisted Nether. Of course, you can also call me by my name in this world, Duke Marcus, the guardian of Azeroth. After saying that, Duke looked at the Titan Guardian through Mark Dooku's eyes, who was no stranger to him. Like most guardians, Tarim had an extremely large body. In terms of height, he was about the same as Alcavan and the other giants, around 10 stories tall. His body was more balanced than Alcavan's, more like a human. His slightly brown earthy skin made people think of the earth at first glance. He had a typical square face, with pinkish white hair that reached his chin, which was a little strange. Coupled with his extremely burly body and the huge warhammer that was constantly emitting lightning, the entire aura of a guardian came out. His pauldrons, belt, gauntlets, and leg guards all had blue edges and white background circular decorations, which looked like incandescent lamps. Although it looked a little ridiculous, anyone with the slightest perceptive ability would be able to sense the earth-shattering power of thunder contained within. As for his brown and black lace ribbons, they were negligible. Duke's words made Tarim's expression turn serious. As a Titan Guardian, he did not care about anything that happened in the outside world. He only cared about his duties and everything related to the Titans. When the Titan left Azeroth, Sargeras had already betrayed the Pantheon. Tarim knew this. Duke, who could make the traitor of the Pantheon Temple suffer a setback, naturally made him look up to him. After a moment of silence, Tarim said, "All right, Duke Marcus, I admit that you have the right to speak to me as an equal. Before we start talking, let me ask a question. I remember that the place where I requested for help was the Dragon's Resting Temple. Why are you here? Respected Lord Protector, the place you are guarding is only Orger. The place that the 5-colored guardian dragon is guarding is the entire Azeroth. Just today, at the Iceground Glacier to the west of Orger, Arthas, the self-proclaimed Lich King, murdered the magic guardian dragon Maligos and almost turned it into a fallen Dracolic. The Dragon's Resting Temple's combat power is very tight, so they asked me, who is better at dealing with such things, to help." After saying that, Mark Dooku threw out a scroll. Tarim raised his hand, and a cluster of lightning flew out. The scroll opened. Suddenly, a green brilliance lit up, and an illusory letter appeared in midair. The paper was full of Titan words written with faint divine power. This was Alexstrasza's handwritten letter. Every guardian had its own unique mark and way of writing, and it could not be deceived at all. After reading the letter, Tarim completely trusted Duke. Alexstrasza, Isra, and Naz Dormu jointly recommended you as the full agent of the Dragon's Resting Temple to help solve Orger's crisis. After reading the letter, I have to admit that you are very powerful. You have completely surpassed the limits of mortals. Even I am envious of your achievements. Unfortunately, my mission binds me. Otherwise, I would be willing to fight against the evil people who betrayed the Titans with you. Thank you for your trust. Duque bowed again. If the Temple of Storm has any trouble, please tell me directly. Taurime let out a long sigh and told Loken's story. This was the same as what Duque had previously revealed to the dragon's resting temple. Therefore, Duque asked Mark to pretend to be listening humbly, but in fact he was dealing with official documents. Until he got to the point, Taurime said with determination, Loken killed my wife and turned my supporters against me. He took everything from me, but everything is about to change. Regardless of whether I have the Dragon Slumber Shrine or your help, I will personally go to the Wisdom Shrine and settle the score with Loken. Duque smiled. Please do not doubt my sincerity. The existence that scourges Azeroth is my enemy. Since I have killed Cthulhu, I don't mind killing another Yogg-Saron. After saying that, Duque took out a ring. Ring of the Fallen Deity. The attributes of this ring had long fallen behind the times. To be honest, Duque did not care about it. The key to the ring was that it was made from one of Cthulhu's eyeballs. This was the best proof of that. Taurime suddenly stood up, and his huge body was like a small mountain rising from the ground. That's right. It's this similar smell. Even if this ring has been washed with holy light, I can still smell the stench of the god of decay. After seeing that Taurime's emotions had been completely stirred up, Duque revealed a mysterious smile. Admit it. Taurime, your power will be greatly weakened if you leave the Temple of Storm. You can't beat Loken in the Wisdom Temple. But if you follow my method, I can guarantee that you will avenge your wife. As soon as Duque said that, Taurime's blue eyes, which were already emitting a faint divine glow, lit up even more. Okay. Tell me I'll do it. I still need you to suffer a crushing defeat at Loken's hands, but before that, I'll have to trouble you to go somewhere secretly. His wife's death had been stimulating Taurime's nerves all the time. Without much hesitation, Taurime nodded heavily. Okay. That night, the wind howled and thunder and lightning flashed. Outside the Wisdom Temple in the north of the Temple of Storm, Taurime raised the Hammer of Thunder and roared loudly on his beloved mount, the ancestor dragon Varanus. Loken, I'm here for Sif. For justice. For the Watchmen who have been corrupted by you. Chapter 1596. The Temple of Wisdom was another temple that had a typical Titan style. No one knew if it was to intimidate those ignorant creatures, or if it was to save trouble when the Titans were creating things. The appearance of the 5 temples could no longer be described as shockingly similar. They were all made from the same mold. The temple at the top of the snowy peak was a huge ring formed by 8 huge Greek pillars that required 30 people to encircle it, forming a circular shape similar to a biscuit sandwich. Adorning the white marble pillars and stone rings were noble golden decorative patterns. The decorative patterns were matched with mysterious Titan runes that were difficult to understand. On the circular floor with a hexagonal shape as the core element, along the edge of the temple were divine earth lamps that looked like head rings. Bound by the outer frame of the half-metal, half-wooden earth lamps were balls of mysterious yellow energy, which provided a glorious illumination for the temple. However, at this moment, the Temple of Wisdom was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. There was no sound of wind or insects. It was even more silent than a tomb. Not only that, the interior of the pillars was shrouded in a layer of fog, making it impossible to see what was inside. Lorcan, there's no point in running away. I know you're here. The huge progenitor dragon Varanus under Taurime let out a loud roar. Unfortunately, its master was too huge. This scene made Mark Dooku, who had followed Taurime to the top of the mountain, feel a little ridiculous. No matter how he looked at it, that sound just now was made because it was overwhelmed. After all, their bodies were almost 1-to-1. Varanus did not have the long snake neck of his dragon relatives. His short and thick neck made his upper body look a little like a crocodile. Taurime landed on the huge platform suspended in the air of the Temple of Wisdom, and his mount followed suit. The progenitor dragon's forearms were its wings, unlike the giant dragons, whose forearms and wings were separated. Villainous huge and thick wings folded up, looking like a pair of arms with their own protective wings. Following Torim into the Temple of Wisdom, Duque quickly read the data of the surrounding environment from the puppet. Huh. That's really smart. The enraged Torim hadn't noticed the changes in his surroundings, but Duque had already seen everything through the data feedback. At this moment, the mist and darkness that shrouded the divine hall suddenly dispersed, revealing the giant sitting on the throne of wisdom. Compared to Torim, his figure was similar. The biggest difference was that his entire body was golden from head to toe. He had golden skin, shoulder-length golden hair, and a golden square face. A white hairband tied his hair so that it hung behind his head, and there was an extra braid at the back of his head. His body also gave off a squarish feeling. Two huge and long white shoulder straps hung down from his pauldrons and draped over his chest to his knees. That kind of pure white clothing and accessories made it difficult for people to see him as an ordinary villain. How should I put it? A hypocrite in white? Torim immediately saw that Loken's throne of wisdom had been entangled by some dark vines, and he immediately revealed a pained expression. As expected, Loken, you've fallen. There was a smile on Loken's golden face. He stood up, raised his golden arms high, and said crazily, "Fallen? No. This should be ascension. My master once let me see the future, and there is no place for you in it. Azeroth will be reborn in the darkness. Yogg-Saron will be released, and the Pantheon will eventually fall." Torim had a very straightforward personality. When he heard the words "the Pantheon will fall," he could no longer hold it in. "Loken, this is the Titan's trial for you." With that, Torim threw his huge hammer that was filled with lightning. It was as if he was throwing an entire mountain. That was the ultimate power of Torim's lightning power that had been condensed for thousands of years. Of course, the aura was extremely terrifying. It should have been like this. The moment the hammer left Torim's hand, the lightning hammer shone as dazzling as the sun. Halfway through the air, it became like the setting sun. When the hammer landed on Loken's body, it had already become dim, like a firefly in the night. There was no need to calculate at all. Just by looking at it, it was obvious that the blow did not cause much damage to Loken. Loken laughed at Torim's stupidity. "You might have a chance of winning if you fought me in your Temple of Storm, but once you leave the Temple of Storm, you're as weak as trash. You should learn from those big lizards in the Sleeping Dragon Temple. If it's not related to you, don't come here." That's right, Loken knew that Torim would lose most of his power once he left the Temple of Storm. So he deliberately lured Torim to his Temple of Wisdom for a decisive battle. Roar! Sensing its master's failure, the ancestor dragon Villainous rushed forward with large strides, opened its huge mouth, and attempted to attack Loken. However, an attack similar to an electric arc descended from the sky and landed on the ancestor dragon's body. It looked like a lightning attack, but in fact, it had nothing to do with the wind element. It was an arcane attack. Villainous' entire body twitched, and it could not move. "Loken!" Torim rushed forward, but was immediately knocked down by another arcane arc and fell to the ground like a dead dog. Torim was in a state of shock and anger. He might have predicted that he would be at a disadvantage, but he really did not think that it would be such a difference. A small difference could perhaps be made up for with perseverance, willpower, and skills, but the difference between an ant and an elephant in strength was enough to make any existence despair. Loken grabbed Torim's neck and lifted his entire body up. Ugh, let go of me, you let go of me." Torim roared helplessly. He desperately slapped Loken's arms and shoulders with his hands and feet, but to no avail. Originally, the two guardians were similar in size, so their strength should be about the same. Now why did it feel like Loken and Torim were like a rough man molesting a little girl? At this time, a male voice suddenly reached the ears of the two guardians who were fighting. "Torim, is this the so-called Battle of Reckoning that you mentioned? How disappointing." The one who spoke was, of course, Duque. It was only at this moment that the two gods remembered that there was indeed such an inconspicuous existence. Loken had ignored Mark because the energy waves emitted by Mark were too weak. Torim, on the other hand, was a typical hot-blooded idiot. In his anger, He completely forgot about the existence of Duque. At this time, Tarim turned his head in surprise and shouted, "Duke Marcus, do something!" "Do something? I will." A mysterious smile appeared on Duque's face. Chapter 1597. Snap! A crisp snap of a finger. A single gesture from this little human, whom Loken had never paid any attention to, caused a huge change in the situation. In the sky surrounded by the circular arcades, in the gaps between the giant pillars, and on the floor of the temple that was covered in hexagonal patterns, layers of yellow light appeared. These lights seemed to have a life of their own as they went straight for Loken the moment they appeared. Any guardian would have a passive talent called Titan's Blessing. This was a blessing that isolated elemental and physical attacks from the modern world from the perspective of the laws. This kind of blessing was equivalent to a huge increase in resistance for no reason, and could only be described as insane. A mere yellow earth elemental attack that landed on Loken's body was of no use at all, but what appeared now was a ferocious attack that contained almost half of Northren's earth elemental power. It was hard to imagine that this kind of ultra-high purity earth elemental energy was released by a little human like Duque. For a moment, Loken saw an illusion. The earth suddenly surged, and countless grains of sand formed a sand wave that connected the sky and the earth. This raging wave of earth elemental energy directly drowned Loken's huge body, and all that was left was a scream. Impossible. The one who let out a whisper was Tarim, who had just escaped death. The surging wave of earth elemental energy had smashed Loken's body out of the Church of Wisdom in just a few steps. Unfortunately, as Loken waved his arm, the Church of Wisdom suddenly blossomed with a blazing red flame, counteracting most of the yellow light. Who are you?" Loken's face, which had always been full of confidence, finally revealed a horrified expression. Duque's body fell backwards, and a huge existence seemed to grow out from beneath his feet, supporting Duque's entire body. Loken immediately noticed that the thing that was supporting Duque was a huge palm that was wrapped in flames. What made his expression change even more was that there was an existence that was frantically tearing at the protective barrier of the Church of Wisdom, forcefully shoving in power that did not belong to the entire temple. "In the name of the Wisdom King, I reject your entry." Loken slammed his fist on the ground. Unexpectedly, the smiling human disappeared, and was replaced by a male human wearing a white mage robe with blue edges. He held a drumstick in his left hand and a long, strange sword in the shape of a long spiral nail in his right. The two of them had similar but different appearances. This time, the existence with the appearance of a human that came later released a nearly overwhelming and terrifying divine power. The newcomer was none other than Duque himself. "In the name of the Guardian of Azeroth, I reject your rejection." Duque tapped his staff, and the divine artifact Atisha's space-breaking power instantly erupted. The three illusory black crows let out sharp caws. The screams were not only unpleasant to the ears, but in Loken's ears, it was worse than a death knell. This was because when the crow's caw spread out, the spatial barriers he had set up in the Wisdom Temple started to collapse one by one. As the force restraining the intruder weakened, the flaming arm that supported Duque began to extend longer and longer. It was obvious that the owner of the flaming arm was crawling out of the portal that opened on the floor of the temple. "No." Loken raised his 10 thick fingers and gestured with his spell in an attempt to mend the spatial barriers of the temple. Just then, a violent tremor came from the bottom of the temple. Thud, thud, thud. The deep and rhythmic bombardment seemed to be shaking the foundations of the temple. "Impossible unless it's..." Loken finally cried out in shock. A mysterious smile appeared on Duque's face. "Yes, the unless you mentioned is here." Thud, thud, thud. At this point, there was no longer a need for special detection or perception. As long as one was not blind, they could see that a giant of the same size as Loken was climbing up the steep mountain wall below the temple. Under normal circumstances, there would be no place for a giant to step on the mountain wall. The newcomer obviously had a better idea. Every move he made would summon the earth element within the mountain wall. The earth responded to his call, arching out handrails and stepping stones for the giant to stand on. The giant seemed to be moving very slowly, but the handrails and stepping stones on the mountain wall would move on their own, as if the giant was taking an elevator. No. This should be some kind of special skill similar to ground shrink, right? Loken's golden face turned pale. As a senior among the guardians of Azeroth, he naturally knew who the newcomer was. He finally squeezed out a name from between his teeth. Alcaphon. Around the temple, the cold wind howled. On the huge floating corridor that connected the Wisdom Temple and the Stone Hall, countless ice and snow were gathering. A giant that was 10 stories tall was forming out of thin air. Suddenly, thunder rumbled in the sky. A lightning giant appeared out of nowhere and began to descend slowly into the temple. No! Impossible. Who are you? How can you command the 4 guardians of Alcaphon? Loken was furious as he glared at the smiling Duque. At this moment, Duque was sitting on the shoulder of the fire giant that rose from the portal on the floor of the temple. That's right. The 4 guardians of the treasury, Alcaphon, Emeron, Corellon, and Turawan. Duque put away the Song of Light and Shadow, and raised his right index finger, shaking it in a smug manner. Stain. 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 I only told the 4 guardians that Odor's guardian, Loken, had been corrupted by Yogg-Saron. He went against the Titan's orders and started to harm his comrades. Then, I shared what I saw with them. At this point, the biggest secret of Alcaphon's treasury was finally revealed. The 4 great guardians weren't guarding any equipment at all, but elements. As the 4 elements that formed the world, they had irreplaceable roles. The status of the 4 guardians was below Odor's guardian and the Pentashade guardian dragon. The 4 of them played a supporting role. They would provide the guardians with enough elements to support the operations of Odor and the dragon's slumber temple. But on the other hand, the 4 guardians of the treasury had similar duties as the guardians. If the laboratory left behind by the Titan collapsed, or if the guardian ancient god was in danger of breaking free, the 4 guardians had the same duty to eliminate the danger. Since it was proven that Loken had betrayed the Titan, there was nothing wrong with the 4 guardians jumping out to do their work. Of course, under normal circumstances, the 4 of them would never know what happened to Odor. After all, Loken had always been very secretive and beautiful, but Duque had tipped them off. Chapter 1598. Loken was still struggling. This struggle was destined to be hopeless and futile. Just like how he had tortured Tarim like a dog, he was now the one being tortured. What he had done before was, to put it bluntly, worthless. Loken, who was in charge of wisdom in Audiobook, did not have a specific element. Being proficient in none meant that he was proficient in everything. Since he knew that Tarim, the king of storms, was coming for trouble, Loken only needed to remove all the wind elements in the temple first. Then, a guardian like Tarim, who only had one element, would be mostly useless and would only be left for him to torture. Loken could play this trick on Tarim, but he definitely could not do it in front of Duque. Duque was a rare demigod with multiple elements and attributes. Loken initially used the earth element, which was the opposite of the wind element, to fill the space in the temple. Duque's first move was to use Alcaphon's earth element to attack Loken. However, the speed of the earth element was too slow, and the sneak attack was unsuccessful. Loken turned to counterattack with the fire element. An ordinary powerhouse might have been beaten to the ground by this counterattack. Duque was also well prepared. He switched to Corellon, the guardian of flames, on the spot. I have all 4 elements on my side. Loken, how do you want to die? Take your pick. When the 4 elemental guardians gathered in the Temple of Wisdom, and there was also a demigod who was good at spatial magic, no one was in a good mood. Duque stood tall with Corellon's support. This time Duque, who was standing on the giant's shoulder, had the same line of sight as Loken. Duque raised his chin high, showing Loken his nostrils. Although the size of a human's nostrils were 2 tiny black dots that were almost negligible in Loken's eyes, Duque's meaning was conveyed. I'm telling you, I'm your master. Your master will always be your master. As the king of wisdom, how could Loken be convinced that the death trap he had painstakingly schemed was broken by a mere human? Even if Duque was now a demigod, it was still unacceptable. Loken would be the first to object if his 25,000 years of experience were wiped out so easily. No. Do you think this is the end? Do you think you can force me to surrender just like that? You've underestimated me. You've underestimated the great Yogg-Saron. Loken raised both of his arms high in the air. In the blink of an eye, his boss, "There's a silly dragon." Oh, Yogg-Saron had responded to his call. Under the noses of Torim, the four guardians and Duque, several thick black thorns suddenly extended from the void beside the Church of Wisdom. As soon as these black octopus-like tentacles appeared, they began to wrap around the three thick pillars on the west side of the Wisdom Temple. The thorns on the thorns pierced into the pillars, like mosquitoes sucking blood, the seemingly hard thorns bulging. It felt like a symbiotic relationship, but it also felt like they were absorbing nutrients from Loken's nest. This was originally an act to dig out Loken's roots and destroy his nest. Loken looked like a martyr who was willing to die for a just cause, causing Duque to feel a headache coming on. Damn, the ancient god's brainwashing technique is really amazing. Fortunately, I already have a backup plan. Letting an ancient god deal with an ancient god was undoubtedly the most efficient way. Recently, Duque had gotten used to asking Elun to be his fighter. When it came to fighting against evil, Elun had always spared no effort. Chandri's meteorite fell from the sky and taught Yogg-Saron a lesson. Bang! There was an earth-shattering sound. The meteor did not hit the temple. Instead, it smashed into the void. In the seemingly empty air, intense waves suddenly appeared. Those were spatial ripples. It was hard for Yogg-Saron to break through space to save his little brother before he could completely break free from his cage. Anywhere with the sky, even without the need for night, could be considered Elun's home ground. Yogg-Saron seemed to have realized this. Compared to a pawn like Loken that could be thrown away after being used, his health was the most important. Without even hesitation, Yogg-Saron retreated. Loken's golden face was pitch black in despair as he stared at the retreating brambles in the void. In the temple, there were still a few huge black vines wrapped around the pillars, but those completely withered vines were now just ugly decorations, useless decorations. No, master. How can you abandon me like this? I have painstakingly planned for centuries for you. Before Loken could finish muttering to himself in despair, he was suddenly blocked by a huge figure in front of him. Torim. The Storm King, Torim, who had killed his wife. On the giant thunder hammer in Torim's hand, the terrifying lightning that bloomed was getting brighter and brighter, and the rumbling sound of thunder was incessant. At this moment, the two ancient guardians heard the voice of Duque's soul in their ears. It was a slightly mocking statement. Yo, Torim, now you can have a fair battle with Loken. Fair? Fair my ass. The reason why the King of Wisdom could abuse Torim was because he could use elements and resources at will, excluding all the wind elements that Torim was good at. Now that the four guardians of the Alcafen treasury were here, ensuring that the four major elements could enter unimpeded, this in itself was the greatest help to Torim. If Loken could still find his parents now, he would definitely complain about Duque for being biased. Duque smiled without saying a word. I'm just being biased, so what? If you have the guts, ask Yogg-Saron to come out and die. Once the matter is done, I'll leave without hiding my achievements and fame. Duque opened a portal and slipped away. To be precise, this guy returned to Karazhan and shamelessly turned on a huge magic mirror that was more than 15 meters tall, comparable to an IMAX movie screen, and shamelessly turned on a paid broadcast. Coming. Place your bets. The Battle of the Ages. Storm King Torim versus Wisdom King Loken. Who do you bet on to win? Dumuk called out to his harem, sat on the custom-made big bed, took out popcorn, and became a spectator. Beside him, Duque's lovers giggled and leaned forward. Their jade bodies spread out as they watched this fair battle with Duque. The outcome of the battle was already decided. He knew all of them, and none of them were proficient. On the other hand, this meant that no matter what, they were all half-baked. When low-density elements met higher-density elements, defeat was the only outcome. Suppressed by the four guardians, Loken, who no longer had the home field advantage, struggled to defeat Torim with arcane magic. In the end, his arcane energy ball was directly smashed by a hammer. Another hammer hit, and Loken's left shoulder caved in. Another hammer hit, and Loken's right arm was smashed to pieces at the elbow. Torim sat on Loken's stomach like a gangster fighting on the street, raised his two huge fists the size of a house, and smashed them down repeatedly. This punch is for heave. Chapter 1599. 10 minutes later, the Titan Guardian, the King of Wisdom Loken, was smashed to pieces just like that. Duque and the Alliance's higher-ups watched as Loken's golden face was deformed by Torim's thunderous punches. First, his nose, which was originally quite straight, was smashed into the shape of a lion's nose. Then his nose was smashed into his cheek. Then his protruding cheekbones were flattened by the punches. Torim, who was extremely resentful, smashed Loken's facial features into a mess. Perhaps even Loken's creator, the Titan's mother, could not recognize him. Even so, the Guardian's strong vitality was still supporting Loken. This guy was actually not dead yet. Since Loken was not dead, it was naturally not the end. Torim was not satisfied after smashing Loken's dog head, so he used his small house-sized fists to pound Loken's chest. Boom, boom, boom. His huge fists smashed down, directly smashing Loken's high ground into a depression. When Duque yelled, "Small fists to pound Loken's chest," Duque's harem was in an uproar. Several people who were drinking spat out their drinks on the spot. Jaina, who accidentally splashed herself, was even more embarrassed and angry as she performed the official version of small fists to pound Loken's chest. Naturally, this kind of flirtatious boxing was treated as a massage. Duque laughed out loud. However, it was easy to have a bad temper when playing with storms. Duque glanced at Queen Sylvanas, hugged her in his arms, and took a whiff. Yo, Sylvanas! We all play with storms and thunder, don't learn from him. Queen Sylvanas rolled her eyes at Duque. Then please take care of our feelings, don't die so easily. If you die, I will definitely treat my enemies more cruelly than Torim. But Queen Sylvie stretched out her fair arms and hugged Duke. She responded to Duke's demand with enthusiasm. For the sake of your loyalty, I will let you have your way with me. For the sake of your loyalty, I can give you a special option today. That's possible. Women are emotional creatures. When they saw that Duque had helped Torim, allowing this righteous man to avenge his wife, they couldn't help but have a better impression of Duque. Those who were willing to mess around stayed, while the rest tactfully retreated. On the other side, Torim had finally destroyed Loken completely. He panted heavily, and the strong light of lightning flowed out from his nostrils. Loken's filthy soul still wanted to escape, but with a single thought from Torim, a bolt of lightning struck down from the sky, blasting Loken's soul into pieces. The King of Wisdom, Loken, no longer existed in this world. Duque, Elun, and the Sleeping Dragon Temple had no objections to Torim's approach. Towards this kind of traitor who sold out his teammates and pushed his companions into the fire pit, no matter what he did, it was not too much to punish him. At first, Alexstrasza wanted to ask if she could interrogate Oder for his information. However, since both Torim and Duque said that there was no need, then forget about it. Duque was the one leading the attack on Oder, and Torim, the local guardian, was the one leading the way. Both of them said that it was fine. Naturally, there was no need to spend a lot of effort to search Loken's rotten soul. Searching one's soul was always accompanied by risks. No one knew what other abilities or tricks the ancient gods had up their sleeves. If they were careless and fell for it, it would be another guardian-level powerhouse falling. They really couldn't afford to pay this price in the current situation. After everything was settled, Torim looked at Mark Dooku, who appeared beside him, and frowned. "You've gone back?" In reality, Duque, who had already started the duel with Queen Sylvie and had just finished using armor break and launched 999 consecutive backstab attacks, was obviously very busy, but through the puppet Mark he said with a straight face, "I just saved a batch of Titan runes for the current magic guardian dragon Maligos. I need time to sort them out." "Ah. That. You've worked hard too." "Yeah. I've worked hard." Duque replied with a double meaning. "About Sif. Thanks." I hope you understand that I have my duty. I understand. But when the matter with odor is over, if there's anything within the scope of my duty, I won't refuse. Yeah. I'll thank you in advance. Duque would never complain about having too many thugs, especially those who had stepped into the divine realm. One had to know that Torim was not the god of hammers. He was the thunder god of the world of Azeroth, Thor. After killing Loken, there naturally wouldn't be the lightning hall that Loken had originally presided over in history. One could imagine how crazy Yogg-Saron would be after losing Loken, an agent who was familiar with Odor's situation. After all, many of its arrangements had been pushed back. Not only that, when the four guardians of the Alkovan treasury joined forces with Torim, Yogg-Saron also remotely controlled its new subordinates to stop expanding outward and shrink the line of defense. At this time, Torim made a request for the Sleeping Dragon Temple and Duque to join forces to send a powerhouse group to attack Odor. Originally, Duque hoped that he could free up his hands to command the allied forces to advance on the east and west lines. But now it seemed like an extravagant hope. After all, Torim revealed a shocking piece of news. I don't regret killing Loken. But I have to tell you something very important. During the time when Loken was under control, Odor's defense mechanism had not been activated, because all the guardians were theoretically still alive. But with Loken's death, Odor's surveillance mechanism will be activated. A Titan Guardian named Observer Orgarin will go to planet Azeroth to inspect after receiving news of Loken's destruction. Inspect? If dragons could explode, the dragon aspects would probably explode into balls of fur. Duque did not know what inspection meant in the eyes of the Guardians. In any case, when he saw that apart from the heartless Onyxia who didn't care about protection, the other dragon aspects were so scared that their scales were standing on end, he knew that these fellows had been traumatized by this. Torim continued, Loken recently threw a few Guardians into Odor to brainwash Yogg-Saron. This matter may be easy to solve. After all, for those brainwashed Guardians, as long as enough pressure is given, they can be reactivated, which is to restore their sanity. The humanoid red dragon sister patted her full chest. Not bad, not bad. No, what I'm going to say next is the main point. After Orgaron's inspection, he will only come to two conclusions. The first is that he will send a code called Alpha to the Pantheon. That means that although the situation is troublesome, it can still be controlled and should continue to be observed. However, I just asked Odor's main control system. The system said that in a world like Azeroth that has been heavily influenced and distorted by the ancient gods, after calculation, Orgarin will send a second code to destroy Azeroth. The probability of Omega is 99%. Chapter 1600. As soon as he said this, the dragon aspects were all stunned. Orgarin has actually already set off, but in order to delay his arrival, I sent him the wrong coordinates in the name of Loken's last words. It's a hidden black hole, and even he won't be able to come out so easily. This way, he'll arrive at Azeroth a little later. Even so, I estimate that we can only buy about an extra month or so. The worst-case scenario is a week. When Orgarin comes out, he'll definitely realize that something is wrong. He'll retrieve the star map of the universe from 25,000 years ago and find the correct coordinates of Azeroth. Our task is very heavy. Not only do we have to attack Yogg-Saron as soon as possible and restore order in Otter, but we also have to stop Orgarin before the Omega destruction signal is transmitted. Otherwise, the Titan will come to Azeroth again and destroy all civilizations and creatures, including us incompetent Guardians. This time, no one was optimistic. No one doubted the power of the Titan of the Pantheon. As the creator of the Guardians and Dragon aspects, when the Titan created them, not only did he imprint absolute obedience in their souls, but he also hid a self-destruction code or something. To destroy them, it would only take a single thought. Even if they fell like Loken and had their self-destruction code removed by the ancient gods, it would be useless. The combat power of the Titan was absolute. Didn't they see how happy the ancient gods of Azeroth were back then? Didn't the Titan get beaten like dogs when they arrived? As soon as Torim said this, the atmosphere became gloomy and gloomy. The dragon aspects looked at each other, and suddenly realized that they could only rely on the power of mortals this time. Nozdormu and Izura had to watch over their respective territories. They could leave for a short period of time, but they couldn't fight for a long time. Alexstrasza and her Red Dragon army were essentially fighting against Arthas' Scourge army and couldn't leave. Of course, it could be said that she was helping the Alliance fight against the Scourge army. The problem was that Arthas was causing trouble, and the first to suffer was the Dragonbone Waste where the dragon race's nest was located. Although they had a grudge with the Second Fool before, the Alliance came to help from across the ocean. If the Alliance really went back on their word, the first to suffer would be Dragon Sleep God Palace. Collegos. Alright then, although he was announced as the new Blue Dragon King and a magic guardian dragon, no one had high hopes for his combat strength. Then, Onyxia will follow you to Orger. Speaking of which, the Dragon Slumber Holy Temple had sent out a whole big circle. And it was still Onyxia who the F***CK she was. The Black Dragon Princess was sent by Duque to help the Dragon Slumber Shrine. In the end, the Red Dragon Sister was embarrassed. Duque, the Sleeping Dragon Temple owes you another favor. When the time comes, we won't go back on our words. Duque chuckled at Big Sis Red Dragon's words. Treat it as a fart. What a joke. Forget it. If I hadn't saved you back then, you would still be working like a slave for the beast men. Duque didn't say anything. That was what his eyes said, and the Red Dragon Sister really understood what he meant. She whimpered like a small animal. The two veteran dragon aspects rolled their eyes at the same time. You're a disgrace to us dragons. Things were basically settled like that. Duque returned to the Alliance and made arrangements at the Throne Conference. The Western Front would be guarded by Muradin and Kurdran, and the Eastern Front would be guarded by William's team of 3. Apart from that, almost all the Alliance's powerhouses would be transferred to attack Orger. Magni loudly muttered. Alright. Dragons, Titan Guardians, Ancient Gods, Lich Kings, almost all the troublemakers that can be imagined have come to Northrend. The Alliance might as well change its name to Salvation Alliance. William spread his hands. When have we not saved the world? The radiant Queen Sylvanas lightly tapped the table with her knuckles. Rejoice, at least there's no burning legion at this time. Queen Sylvanas' words made sense, and the Dwarf King could only shrug and raise the wine glass in his hand. Alright, let's toast to kill Jaden, whose butt was stuck in the Sunwell portal and died. Very naturally, only the group of rowdy dwarves raised their glasses with him, and the other leaders just smiled. No matter how anxious they were, the necessary preparations still had to be done. Because of Loken's early death, the entire defense system of Orger had been activated without Yogg-Saron even needing to stir up trouble. Before entering the core area of Orger, they had to pass through the city wall area. Although Duque himself knew what was inside, he didn't have the excuse of being a spy of the Burning Legion this time. So he couldn't lie and say that he knew all the secrets of the Titans. Hence, with the explanation of the new guide, Tarim, the Alliance knew what was in the city wall area. First was the absolute forbidden spell formation. To be precise, it was the Titan runic spell formation that prohibited flying objects. Anything that was more than 100 meters above the ground would be instantly destroyed by the spell formation. This eliminated the possibility of using the flying battleships to flatten the area. Secondly, before seeing the first boss at the door, the blazing behemoth, they had to fight a medium-sized local battle. This was because from the moment they entered the door, thousands of guards would rush out to meet the invaders like Duque. From the cast steel defender, which was the size of a human and looked like a dwarf made of steel, but was actually powered by low-level Titan runes, to the rune-etched statue, which was a 2-story tall iron rail puppet, to the mechanical gnome battle tank, which looked like a spider, and to the messy mechanical attack plane 54A that looked like a helicopter. Anyway, there was a bunch of lifeless mechanical guards that had enough energy to almost perpetual motion blocking the way. If they didn't dismantle all these guys into scrap metal, they wouldn't be able to enter Orger. As a last resort, Duque had Magni prepare a batch of specially modified tanks. These were super tanks that were based on the main battle tanks of the Iron Furnace Castle, with Tarim providing the materials, and Duque's newly developed, secretly learned, Titan runes to strengthen them. Only such a tank could easily destroy the guards left behind by the Titans. As for the modifications, that was the job of the great gnome craftsman Jerbin. He and Magni would naturally lead the dwarves and gnome craftsmen from the Iron Furnace Castle to work overtime day and night to complete the modifications. During this period of time, Duque was basically focused on studying the Titan runes left behind by Maligos in Karazhan. Suddenly one night, there was a knock on the door. After sensing for a while, Duque said, "Come in." It was Onyxia who came in. Unexpectedly, Onyxia came in wearing a Christmas princess outfit. Cosplay. Chapter 1601. Duque was dumbfounded. Damn, there was still a long time before Christmas. The black dragon, who had transformed into Countess Katrana, was practically fully armed. A red victorious battle suit, suspenders, and a red and white Christmas hat. As long as Santa Claus was male, he wouldn't be able to resist. "What are you doing, princess?" Duke was never one to reject his family's sugar-coated bullets or sugar-coated bombs. After Duque's godly sword went through a simple explanation of the dragon's lair, this silly female dragon finally revealed the truth of the matter. She consciously lowered her posture and forced an awkward smile onto her face. "Will we be punished by the Titans?" Duque laughed so hard that his 8-pack abs could be seen. After all this time, it turned out that this female dragon was still afraid of death. Duque pressed the dragon's head down. "Don't talk, savor it carefully." Onyxia rolled her eyes at Duque, but still did as she was told. Only when he was comfortable as the host was he willing to reveal some useful information. According to Valen's testimony, 25,000 years ago, Sargeras, a member of the Titans, betrayed the Pantheon and dealt a heavy blow to the Pantheon. Then he roped in the two giants of Eridar, Kil'jaeden and Archimonde. Only then did the Burning Crusade begin. Thousands of planets fell, and turned into a sea of fire. Onyxia listened quietly, not slacking off in her work. There's no doubt that the Titans are powerful. Even after 25,000 years, the protective spell formation left by the Titans is still protecting Azeroth from the Burning Legion's direct attacks. Then let's make a hypothesis. If the Titans are fine, why don't they go and find trouble with the Burning Legion? When Duque said this, Onyxia's eyes lit up. As smart as she was, she quickly thought of the crux of the matter. That's right. The Titans can't do it. The heavy blowback then was absolutely devastating. Otherwise, they would have been beaten by Sargeras to hide in some subspace and seal themselves. In any case, they would definitely be in a state of immobility. Otherwise, the Burning Legion wouldn't be so unscrupulous. Onyxia's eyes lit up, and then dimmed again. Hehe. Don't worry too much. The Titans' disappearance wasn't necessarily a good thing, nor was it a bad thing. As the strongest race in the universe, even if the Titans died, it was impossible for them to be completely wiped out. Think about it, the creations they left behind were still functioning normally after 25,000 years. Wasn't that proof of their greatness? If the Burning Legion really revives once more, then the Titans will definitely stand against the Legion in a certain way at a critical moment. Duque gently caressed the back of Onyxia's neck. For dragons, even in human form, that was undoubtedly where their reverse scale was. But for a dragon who had lost her will and only wanted to seek refuge, at this moment, it was just a proof of her loyalty to Duke and tame him. As she breathed, Onyxia let out a sound similar to that of a satisfied cat. Duque encouraged her. Don't worry too much. Just based on my achievement of sending Sargeras' soul into the bottomless abyss, even if the Titans were to jump out again, they would only reward me and not blame me. A planet is no different from a pebble on the roadside to the Titans. As long as I can deal with Sargeras, I can ask them for the entire planet Azeroth as my possession. It's just a matter of a word. So Onyxia, you're destined to be my possession. Being declared so domineeringly that she was his possession, Onyxia wasn't angry. Instead, her whole body trembled, and an expression of joy appeared on her face. Duque took the opportunity to move his sword directly with his mind, and released a continuous stream of arcane impact. With the divine sword, He almost made Onyxia roll her eyes. Well, damn it, why can't I look directly at the words Dragonmaw clan in the future? Speaking of which, Duque's words were actually 70% true and 30% false. As a transmigrator, how could he not know that the Titans had already typed GG in the battle with Sargeras 25,000 years ago, while cursing at Sargeras' entire family? But a creation Titan was a creation Titan. You're still a creation Titan after 25,000 years. Since a half-baked demigod like Duque had the theoretical possibility of unlimited resurrection, how could the Titans not have a way out? The Titans did die, but that was in the physical sense. The problem was that their souls were still there. Apart from being unable to jump out and fight Sargeras head-on, the Titans' magical powers were still beyond the reach of the natives of Azeroth. That was why in the original battle with the Burning Legion in history, the Titans in their soul form jumped out to play the god weapon distribution, in order to maximize the strengthening of the people of Azeroth and fight against the Legion. Naturally, Duque wouldn't reveal too much about what happened in history. In any case, it was enough for Onyxia to understand that only by following him could Duque have a way out. To control this fellow who had a lot of ideas, it was necessary to stimulate him from time to time and maintain a sense of urgency. Perhaps this was the so-called way of dragon mastery. A week was a necessary time to attack Otter. It couldn't be helped. In addition to a large number of guards, there was also a strange restriction in the city wall area of Otter. It was something similar to planet Azeroth's protective array formation, except that it prohibited demigods and above from entering through the front door. It was the same teleportation portal that led to Otter's independent space. Existences below demigod level would be sent to the city wall area, while powerhouses above demigod level would be directly sent to the Guardian Temple area. Why can't we directly break into the Guardian Temple area with demigod-level combat power? Tarim, don't you have a shortcut to the inside? Duque had asked such a question before. Tarim replied, yes, but that way, we won't be able to save the rest of the Guardians. Loken's death has already alarmed Yogg-Saron. According to his habits, when we enter, we will probably be directly teleported to the Stairway of Madness where Yogg-Saron is. At that time, we will face the siege of Yogg-Saron and his direct subordinates, as well as the 3 Guardians. On the contrary, if it's a powerhouse in the realm of ordinary heroes attacking, Yogg-Saron will ignore it and let Otter's defense system operate? Tarim said with certainty. Yes, so the best time for us to join the battle is to wait until the mortal powerhouses defeat my colleagues and restore them to normal. Duque rubbed his eyebrows. After fighting for so long, he finally felt a little lonely at the top. King against king, general against general. It was not good for Duque to participate in low-level battles. Firstly, it would be a waste of combat power, and secondly, it would deprive his partners of the opportunity to advance. Duque didn't know how many people had the opportunity to advance to demigod level, but every advancement must be a powerhouse who had been honed through trials of blood and fire. He had no reason to take away their opportunity. Chapter 1602. When Duque announced at the Alliance Throne meeting that he would not personally participate in the battle before Otter's Stairway of Madness, and asked Tarim to explain himself, the leaders of the Alliance revealed complicated expressions. In the past, even when Duque ascended to become a demigod, everyone still did not feel that it was real. After all, it seemed that Duque had not changed much. He was still in charge of the Alliance, maintaining the internal and logistical operations with the momentum of one man against 1,000. 1,000 internal officials could not compare to one Duque. This was already an iron law. While advancing to a demigod, Duque did not forget the development of the Alliance. He was still the beacon that guided the development of technology and civilization. Originally, the atmosphere was not bad, but with the birth of the second demigod in the Alliance, things seemed to have changed. Servana's apotheosis was more like an invisible stimulus that stimulated everyone to pursue higher realms and greater power. Otherwise, they would be pulled down. Duque indeed said, "Everyone work hard. I hope that in 10 years, most of you here will be able to become demigods." The Burning Legion will make a comeback in 10 years at most. When that time comes, it is very likely that we will have to face the big three of the Legion at their peak, as well as the various Void Lords. That's right, because of the existence of the Planetary Protection Array. Even if the demons of the Burning Legion could forcefully descend, their strength would be greatly reduced. Everyone could kill the Void Lords that were reduced to dogs, but they might not be able to kill the original. This was because when the demon's health, strength, magic, and other indicators were several times stronger than before, their strength was no longer increased by a few times, but by dozens of times in minutes. Without enough peerless powerhouses, they could not even withstand the prelude of the Legion's return. When all the fields were destroyed, the mountains and rivers were polluted, and there was a lack of sources of food and drinking water. How long could the lonely main cities hold on? Nethario died, and so did Malygos. Onyxia and Calegos, who had replaced them, could only match up to the power of one of the original dragon aspects. In fact, they might even be far from being as good as, in the most ideal situation, the Planetary Defense Array would only have 80% of its power left. The Burning Legion's determination to destroy Azeroth, coupled with the fact that they did not know how to prevent the civil war between the Bronze Dragons, Duque could foresee that with the fall of Nozdormu in the future, the defense circle of the planet would be further weakened. When the barrier was no longer a barrier, he could only rely on these mortal experts in front of him. 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. No matter how strong Duque was individually, it was impossible for him to fend off all the demons. It was no exaggeration to say that whether or not these people could become demigods would determine the fate of the entire Azeroth. This was the reason why Duque had to let them train. Everyone had a fire burning in their hearts, and they were secretly suppressing it. No matter if it was for his own people, for his own country, for the Alliance, or even for this world, he had to become a demigod. Those below the level of demigod are ants. Then on the day of the expedition, after entering Alder, the atmosphere suddenly changed. Wait, Duque, didn't you say you weren't coming? Everyone was shocked to see Duque sitting on a tank with a huge cannon barrel. Duke Marcus said he wasn't coming, but that doesn't mean Mark Dooku isn't coming. Duque was seriously farting. Sophistry. Shameless. Pervert. Yes. Seconded. A group of Alliance experts jeered. F*CKU. Didn't you say you would let us go alone? We've done so much mental preparation and mental struggle. You're actually here again. Facing the bombardment, no matter how shameless Duque was, he could only admit defeat. I'm only going to fight the first stage. I'll run after killing the flaming beasts. Why? Sally Whitemane asked. Unknowingly, Duque had his arms around Magni, Bulang, Jerben, and a few other dwarves. They looked like they were tap dancing, and they smiled incomprehensibly. Giant ships and cannons, this is a man's romance. Duque pointed into the distance. Look, it's more advanced than us, but it's from an ancient civilization. Brothers, do you see that? Magni raised his hand to cover his forehead. He stood on his tiptoes and looked into the distance. I see it, it's the crystallization of technology that transcends time. Bulang jumped onto his big brother's shoulder and waved his fist excitedly. I see it, it's an even more awesome cannon. Jerben jumped onto Bulang's shoulder, and the 3 dwarves started building a human ladder. He waved his wrench. I see it, it's the call of the future. The group of Alliance experts was speechless. They looked like they were saying, "You're all dirty. I can't stand you technological maniacs." Generally speaking, there were 3 types of vehicles modified with Titan runes. The first was the Mammoth tank, which focused on defense. Not only did it have 3 layers of armor, but it also used the wreckage of the Burning Legion's interstellar battleship floating in the Azeroth Void battlefield. They broke off the relatively intact armor and had the help of the dragons. It took them a long time to cut it out. It was equipped with 4 105mm howitzers with various beginner-level Titan rune shells. A round of shots would definitely make the enemy wish they were dead. The second type was the Katyusha self-propelled rocket launcher, which focused on long-range firepower. Other than the insane pseudo-missile system, there was also a human cannon, which was specially used to knock people out, to deal with the boss flame behemoth. The third type was the Harley motorcycle that Duque and the other dwarves were riding. Duque, who had transformed into Mark Dooku, stretched out his right middle finger and pushed against the large sunglasses in front of his eyes. He said in a low voice, "Does everyone know the rules?" "Humph. Where were you when I won the Lochromaden Snow Rally 36 times in a row?" Magni also stretched out his short middle finger and pushed against his goggles. "Humph. Let me, Dan Morrow's racing god, show you what real racing skills are." Bulang twisted the motorcycle's accelerator. With the brakes locked, the rear wheel gave off a puff of white smoke from the friction with the ground. He, just in time to use my Kill You 3000 wheel supercharging system. "Don't forget to see my taillights." The dwarf craftsman Jurban stretched out his short legs and stepped on the custom-made accelerator. The four of them were completely in the zone, full of energy. In 5 rounds, the one who pulls back the most number of guardians will be the winner, Duque said loudly. "The winner will receive the title, Mount Akina's Racing God," Magni said. "The loser will leave behind the emblem. Those who don't pull enough guardians, fall off the bike, or get their bikes destroyed will be considered losers," Bulang said. "By the way, what kind of place is Mount Akina?" Jurban asked. Chapter 1603. Motorcycles. Although the Alliance had begun to study the lightning of diesel engines, the progress in engineering wasn't that simple. Duque had the system elf to help him memorize those distant memories, but he hadn't studied mechanical engineering before he transmigrated, so he only knew the general idea of many things and didn't know the details. Most of the time, the modification of a nut or a transmission shaft was a complete redesign. It was like a simpler bicycle. On Earth, the world's first bicycle was made of wood by the Frenchman Chirac in 1790. It wasn't until Duque transmigrated and experienced more than 200 years of history that he finally had a plan. There were bicycles with big and small wheels, wheelbarrows that pulled people on acrobatic roads without looking back, and everything else. Because the dwarves and gnome craftsmen had such amazing ideas, Duque had to follow history and change the motorcycle to something similar to the original design in history. However, it looked more like Arnold Schwarzenegger's Harley-Davidson motorcycle, Fat Boy, in the movie Terminator 2. It looked like a diesel car on the surface, but it was full of Titan technology inside. Because it didn't burn diesel, there was only a miniature Titan rune power array in the entire cylinder. 36 of the smallest Titan runes formed a structure that was almost perpetual. It would automatically absorb any basic elements around it, such as earth, water, fire, and wind as energy to replenish the power inside. Unfortunately, the energy absorbed was only enough for the motorcycle to crawl at a speed of 20 kilometers per hour. If he really wanted to perform fast and furious, he had to use up the stored energy. Because the element pool of this new motorcycle was very small and limited by the level of materials science, the time it could reach 80 kilometers per hour was very short. To put it simply, 8 hours of charging, 5 minutes of acting cool. If the energy supply of the rifle mounted on the back of the motorcycle was taken into account, the time was even shorter. It could only be maintained for about 3 minutes while firing, and then it could only return to 20 kilometers per hour. Duque had his own ideas. He wanted to install a fully automatic ammunition chain, and then synchronize it with magic, so that the rifle would turn wherever the motorcycle's helmet turned. Unfortunately, at the moment when automatic rifles hadn't been developed, Duque could only extravagantly create a Titan ray rifle that didn't need ammunition by using the energy of the Titan runes as ammunition, like magic cannons. The price he had to pay was naturally a reduction in his racing time. Of course, the sneaky Duque wasn't willing to see the performance of the vehicles, including the motorcycles, drop so much. He installed external energy ports on Fatboy's motorcycle, Katyusha rocket launcher, and Mammoth tank. In theory, as long as a high-purity Titan energy crystal was inserted into the interface, the vehicle could be charged immediately, providing extreme power for a longer period of time. Alright, after talking for so long, why didn't the hero team just sweep over? My dear Mr. Gavinrat has seen this in blood and tears. Although every guard in Oder's city wall area did not have the offensive power to destroy the world, their skin was thick enough to give any hero a headache at the current stage. That was not what was more desperate. While the vehicles were being prepared, Gavin Rad, who didn't believe in superstition, took advantage of his thick skin and thick flesh and started farming with his wind sword. In the end, a funny thing happened. After 3 hours of hard work, he carried more than a dozen iron dwarf-like, cast steel defenders, and finally dismantled them into scrap metal, the cast steel defenders, that he had spent a lot of effort. A metal door in the distance opened, and a dozen identical iron dwarfs ran out to replace their original positions. Gavin Rad's body immediately bent forward in frustration, and he fell into a miraculous state with an Orz posture that was similar to a dog crying. That's right, the entire Oder city wall area was a defensive zone with a fully automated guard production factory. Any battle damage would be replaced by the main control computer of the defensive zone within a certain period of time. There was only one way to pass through the city wall area. Kill faster than the production of the defense system, and you had to quickly advance to the main control tower of the factory. Only by destroying the tower could you stop the production of the guards in a part of the area. Anyone who tried to use human wave tactics to fight a war of attrition would only be drowned by the real human wave tactics. Moreover, assault battles were not to be fought casually. To put it bluntly, the only thing that could really restrain those guards was the energy weapons forged with Titan runes. Let's go, let's go! The 4 veteran drivers took the lead on their motorcycles, shaking off the slow mammoth tanks and Katyusha rocket launchers 9 streets behind them. Since Oder itself had a large number of automatic attack vehicles, the entire area in front of the city wall area was paved with extremely flat super hard bricks. It was practically a holy ground for motorcycles. In the blink of an eye, even the taillights of the motorcycles could not be seen. Yahoo! Gerben used his light weight to his advantage and stepped on the accelerator all the way. The mini Titan engine let out a deafening roar, providing surging power to this large motorcycle that weighed almost half a ton. The entire heavy motorcycle seemed to be flying. Left turn, right turn. Galloping at high speed, Gerben's motorcycle made 3 S-shaped turns of different sizes, easily passing through the middle of the 10 iron dwarves without suffering any damage. Ha! You want to hit the god of racing? You're not qualified. Gerben laughed as he drove the motorcycle up a small steel slope. To be honest, he really enjoyed the feeling of riding on the clouds. However, he was just a little bit away from his extreme joy turning to sorrow. Right in front of him, next to a seemingly abandoned iron tower, a huge iron golem that was 2.5 stories tall suddenly appeared. This was called Etched Rune Golem, and it was a classic siege weapon. It raised its huge palm and slapped through the air. For a moment, Gerben almost peed his pants. If he hadn't activated a privately installed ejector at the last moment, his height would have dropped from 1 meter to less than 10 centimeters. Yep, he almost turned into minced meat. The few motorcycles that pretended to be pretentious received varying degrees of welcome from the guards. Magni was chased by a mechanical gnome battle tank. The mechanical gnome gripped the control stick tightly and fired a series of machine guns at Magni. If Magni hadn't cheated by turning the Balrog hammer into a huge flame shield that blocked the area near the taillights, his motorcycle would have been blown to smithereens. Bulang was even more amazing. He had the ability to drive the motorcycle while using a Santos famous hunting rifle that dropped from the Sunwell to fight the mechanical attack plane 54A that looked like a helicopter in the sky. Among the few pretentious criminals, the most arrogant one was, of course, Duque. Relying on his familiarity with the terrain, Duque drove the motorcycle in a zigzag pattern and directly pulled over, more than 1,000 guards over. Chapter 1604. Snakeskin movement sounded simple. It was just an S-shaped movement to avoid the attacks. In reality, it was not so easy to deal with the Titan guards with the precise calculation system. Different levels of calculation methods were destined to have different responses. The Titan guards here were cheating in the eyes of mortals. It was like playing rock, paper, scissors. The opponent would always be 1 second slower than you. By the time you finished, You could no longer change, and the opponent would be the one who countered you. Snakeskin movement was the same here. Many people thought that simple movement could disturb the guards, but it was not so. Without a truly random movement, there was no way to fool the Titan guards. The randomness of the human brain would often unintentionally hide one's habits. For example, leaning 10 degrees to the left for 2 seconds, and leaning 10 degrees to the right for 2 seconds. When the Titan guards figured out the pattern, they would probably be able to give the poor guy a song. Therefore, Duque discussed with the system elf and came up with the strongest anti-trap snakeskin movement system. It was the same dodging, but the other 3 guys would be shot if they dodged a few times. Although the motorcycle came with the Alliance's latest reactive armor and a magic shield that could be activated by activating the Titan rune system, it was still a motorcycle. After all, it could not be as big as the mammoth tank. In terms of protection, it was only a fraction of the mammoth tanks. After a few rounds of fierce attacks from the other party, even the most reckless Magni had no choice but to pull the few monsters back obediently. What about Duque? Damn it! Why can't those monsters hit you? Magni, who was also on his way back, saw Duque's performance, and his eyes almost popped out. Magni was really upset. Why did those brainless mechanical guards hit him? Apart from the first 2 or 3 shots, they were getting more and more accurate. In the end, almost all of them were sharpshooters, and he had to run like a rat. On Duque's side, he didn't feel that Duque was doing anything special. In any case, all the Titan guards seemed to have learned how to shoot. When Duque dodged to the left, they shot to the right. When Duque dodged to the right, they shot to the left. They circled around Duque's motorcycle and didn't hit a single one. If he had this kind of treatment, he dared to say that he could pull 10,000 monsters back. Duque smiled. Magni, your dodging is too formulaic. Even I can tell that you like to swing 15 degrees to the left for 3 seconds, then turn 10 degrees to the right for 2 seconds, then swing left for 2.5 seconds, and finally turn right for 4 seconds. What Duque said was the trajectory calculated by the system elf, so of course it wouldn't be wrong. Magni looked as if he had eaten a bunch of dead flies on the spot. His mouth was wide open, and he couldn't say anything for a long time. This guy didn't believe it. He decisively slowed down and went to lure another wave of people. This time he deliberately changed his habits. In the first 10 seconds, the guards were indeed unable to hit him. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for him to hit his target with every shot, causing his motorcycle to smoke. The King of Ironforge was so frightened that he croaked. What's wrong this time? Shorty King looked like he was about to cry. He increased his speed and caught up with Duque to ask. This time it's a fixed habit again after 20 seconds. Are you? Duque repeated Magni's actions again. This time, Magni had no choice but to admit defeat. He was King seen through again. Then how can I be like you and achieve full evasion? First you have to have a system elf. Of course, the honest gentleman Dumuk smiled and said. You have to first prepare 100 different evasion patterns. You have to change one every 10 seconds. Only then will you be able to survive the 5 minutes safely. CK. Magni had been with Duque for a long time. He had even learned the catchphrase of the Celestial Empire on Earth. When Magni was cursing, Duque swung his arm and used the Titan rune rifle on the motorcycle to blow up the head of a certain iron dwarf. Under Magni's gaze, a blue cube jumped out. Clearly, this was the purest form of arcane energy, or Titan energy. Duque swung his arm, and a steel cable shot out from the back of the motorcycle. There was a small hook at the top of the steel cable, and it accurately grabbed the blue cube and pulled it back into the motorcycle. Magni noticed that the originally empty energy tank on Duque's motorcycle was suddenly filled up. CK. There was such a thing? Magni wasn't a marksman. Moving targets wasn't his forte. But the mechanical motorcycle had more than one attack ability. As long as it was a modification, there would be tricks. As the best blacksmith and mechanic in the world, Magni naturally mixed in a lot of his own stuff. It was only then that Duque realized that for the sake of racing, the back of his motorcycle was specially made. He had crazily stuffed a bunch of space bags into it. Magni pressed a red button, and the rear of the motorcycle spewed out a huge lump of asphalt, leaving a long black path along the high-speed motorcycle's trajectory. The Dwarf King then took out a cigar that had been lit at some point in time, and took a deep puff. Then, without even looking, he threw it behind him. It instantly caused a huge fire. The mechanical guards that were following closely behind were instantly hit. This asphalt wasn't just any asphalt. It was added by Magni, the newest model of gunpowder that didn't cost any money. The shameless Magni had even asked the Alliance to reimburse them. The huge fire was accompanied by a violent explosion. More than 40 guards were burnt into scrap metal on the spot. The Titan Energy Cube wasn't something that every guard could drop. However, Magni had cast his net wide. After causing such a huge ruckus, he was bound to get something. As a matter of fact, he immediately obtained 2 energy bricks. As expected, none of the dwarves who could become leaders these days were useless. Brian's marksmanship was accurate, and his Titan Ray rifle was always accurate. He fired fiercely at the team leader, or the monsters that looked like elites. He would always be able to get energy bricks, and he would be able to use the battle to fuel the battle. Gerben, the dwarf, was very smart. After listening to Duque's words, he actually learned Snakeskin Basic. Although he couldn't dodge as beautifully as Duque, he could still dodge 70% to 80% of the time. In the end, when the 4 street racers returned, they had brought back more than 2,000 mechanical guards of various models. Holy light! Can we really kill so many enemies? Iril, who was sitting on the Katyusha rocket launcher, paled. Boss! Well done, I love you. Gavin, who was sitting in the driver's seat, shouted excitedly. He turned to Iril and yelled. Prepare to fire the rocket launcher. The coordinates are 500 yards in W. Just fire at will. Fire at will? What if we blow up our own people? Iril was also anxious. T. It'd be great if those guys could be killed so easily. Duque's puppet aside, the other 2 can descend from heaven, and Gerben has a full set of escape devices. Chapter 1605. Then I don't care anymore. After aiming, Hoof pressed the launch button with her eyes closed. In the next moment, the sound of the rocket propellant being ignited was so loud that it almost deafened Imriel. Only then did she remember to wear earphones. Not only were they earplugs, but they also had a magical communication system that Duque had personally made, which allowed sound to be transmitted. Only then did she hear Tyron's angry roar. Imriel, where are you aiming at? Are you going to kill your own people? Oh God, it's over. It's Duque, all right. You'll get your punishment later. Ever since Aurelia and Sasha were forced out of the hero group to wait for birth, and Sylvanas was forced out because he became a demigod, the Alliance's hero group had fallen into a ridiculous situation of lacking archers. Cannons had a parabolic trajectory. Apart from aiming with an iron sight, this thing also required a sense of shooting. After Boulang went racing, everyone suddenly realized that there were not enough archers to be the Katyusha's cannoneers. Tyron, Lilith, and Chandris, Tyron's adopted daughter, added up to 3. However, there were 5 rocket launchers. Adding Solarian, who was considered a long-range mage, and Hoof, who was inexplicably thrown into the shooting seat, there were 5 cannoneers. In the end, coordination between infantry and cannons was not that fun. Not to mention the more advanced coordination between vehicles and cannons. Hoof panicked, and immediately sent a whole car full of 30 rockets at Duque, who was at the forefront. Looking at the dazzling fire meteors in the sky, half of which had missed and were all aimed at him, Duque did not know if he should say it out loud. The real Katyusha could cover the size of a football field. This time, Duque had used the magically modified Titan Energy Katyusha to attack Otter. Blowing up an area the size of 3 football fields at once was no problem at all. Anyway, in the end, Duke's words changed to "Don't worry." F***CK. Mark Dooku number 3 dead. Cause of death: killed by a stupid teammate. In Karazhan, Duque angrily threw down his controller as he watched the originally clear mirror images turn into snowflakes. The gaming experience was terrible. This game is playable? On the side, Onyxia and Vashti were covering their mouths and giggling. On the other side, Hoof was also scared out of her wits. Listening to the various sounds coming from the earpiece, her face was as white as a sheet. What the hell? Why are you bombing Duque? Theon's voice rang out. Duque's substitute has been killed. The shameless Boulang was the first to let out a surprised voice. Really? There was a clear hint of excitement in Magni's voice. Really? This time, the title of Mount Akina's racing god is in suspense again. Jerbin yelled excitedly. What followed was a series of pecks between chickens. When Duque controlled Mark du Cuno. For to rush back to the scene, they had already destroyed the first Guardian factory, and there wouldn't be any more iron dwarfs surging out for the time being. What Duke saw was a miserable-looking Hoof who kept saying, "I'm sorry," and a cocky Magni who opened his palm and asked Duke for the car emblem. "Give me the car logo, Duque, you can't go back on your word. We agreed beforehand that being killed counts as a loss." Looking at this smug rookie dwarf racer, Duque rolled his eyes and pointed at the debris that had been blown up by Hoof. "There, the car logo is over there. Look for it yourself." Oh no. Magni instantly felt bored with the title of Mount Akina's racing god that he had picked up by sheer luck. Duque shrugged, then went over to touch Hoof's head. "Don't take it to heart. Just be more careful next time." But, Hoof was so upset that he was about to cry. "I'm really fine. In the end, it's the fault of a certain fellow who's good at long-range attacks and went racing." With that, Duque's gaze turned sharp as he swept his gaze across the room. A certain Bronzebeard family's third son immediately shrunk his neck, then shifted his short legs and sat on Hoof's previous seat. Imriel's eyes were still brimming with tears. To be honest, Flaming Beast itself isn't worth my time. But Odor's first son was a very meaningful battle for the Alliance. I hope every leader of the Alliance can experience this personally. When Duque said this, the whole place quieted down. Then, Duque began to explain the significance of this battle. 25,000 years ago, the Titans of the Pantheon had to deal with the demons that came from the twisting void to maintain the peace of the universe. It was a never-ending war. Other than the extremely powerful demons, there were also countless low-level demons running around. The Pantheon had to send out their strongest battle titan, Sargeras, to deal with those powerful demons. But how did those low-level demons deal with them? With that, everyone followed Duque's gaze and looked at the Titan guards that had been reduced to rubble. If we can obtain the defense system left behind by the Titans, we can use the endless mechanical guards as the first line of defense to protect Azeroth. Of course, this is something to be happy about. But we have to prepare for the worst. We might not be able to obtain any advanced technology directly from Odor. That's not important. What's important is that as the strongest in the Alliance, as the leaders of the Alliance, we must first have a broad vision and know what the future war will be like. The population of our races is limited. If we want to train a swordsman, even if we train him from a young age, it will take at least 16 years to train a barely qualified swordsman. But he might not even last a minute on the battlefield before being killed by a powerful demon that can resurrect. Life is limited. Using a limited life to fight against an unlimited number of enemies. This kind of thinking is wrong. We should cherish the lives of our soldiers more. So I hope that everyone can develop a newer, more forward-looking thinking about war. Of course, we have to continue to train traditional professionals. This is the foundation for us to fight against the strongest of the Burning Legion. But for those ordinary people who don't have the talent to be professionals, we have to teach them new forms of war. For example, high-energy rifles, the Titan cannons we saw today, and the interstellar battleships we may seize in the future. When Duque said this, everyone was already deep in thought. We are the leaders of the Alliance, and also the helmsmen of the advancement of the various races and countries. If our thinking is rigid and refuses to accept new things, then the destruction of Azeroth will enter the countdown. So we have to take advantage of this rare opportunity to see more, listen more, and think more. I hope that after we defeat Yogg-Saron, we can see everyone with a new way of thinking and outlook. Chapter 1606. Before reaching the demigod realm, Duque had been focused on improving himself. When he arrived, he felt that it was difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. This was a very practical problem. When the planet Azeroth's protective spell formation was still in place, he organized the defense of a dark portal, and at most, Karazhan, the Sunwell and the Dalagen. Apart from these few places, there were no other places on the planet where demons could descend on a large scale. However, when the planet's protective spell formation collapsed, it would be a basket full of holes. Patching it up would be a joke, unless a brand new cover was built to cover the entire Azeroth. Duque knew that was impossible. Sargeras would eventually return from the abyss. At that time, if he didn't fail, the war with the Burning Legion would never end. One day, the creatures of Azeroth would use up their last drop of blood, and the destruction of planet Azeroth would mark the end. It was unimaginable how big a Titan was at its peak. Duque only knew that Sargeras was huge. During the Ancient War, Sargeras had desperately shrunk himself, trying to find a way to pass through the portal. Just from the parts of his body, he could tell that he was at least a few dozen stories tall. And this was the shrunken version. In his complete form, he was probably not much smaller than planet Azeroth. Even if Duque became a true god, it probably wouldn't be enough to fight such an opponent. Duque didn't know what realm was above the true god. He only knew that the few ancient gods, as well as the fire demon king Ragnaros and the other elemental lords, had all been crushed by the Pantheon army led by Sargeras and rubbed against the ground. In the end, purely for the sake of Xing Hun, they weren't really killed. After transmigrating to Azeroth, Duque was enlightened. Anyway, this world was the same as the game and history he was familiar with. If one person couldn't beat an elite monster, they would find two companions, and the three of them would kill it together. A small boss would find a team of 5 to kill it. A big boss would be killed by a team of 15 or 20 people. If they couldn't even deal with the final boss, they would send a 40-man team to kill it. If an ordinary powerhouse couldn't do it, he would send a hero. If a hero couldn't do it, he would send a demigod. If one race didn't have enough people, then they would add a few more races. If the alliance wasn't enough, then they would add the horde. If that wasn't enough, then they would recruit people from all over the universe. They would definitely be able to find top-notch experts to fight against the Burning Legion. In addition, Duque was crazily using his advanced technology to wipe out the Burning Legion's advantage in numbers. With such a quantitative and qualitative change, would Sargeras die or not? Of course, the prerequisite for all of this was that the leaders of the Alliance didn't court death. Although Duque was the helmsman, for the ship to sail smoothly, it still needed the cooperation of many people. The more advanced technology was, the more leaders needed to be open-minded and realistic at the same time. Fortunately, apart from Theon and Gavin Rad, who were in their 50s, the other leaders in the Alliance were either very young, or monsters who weren't very old or wouldn't age. The dwarves, elves, and Draenei were all long-lived, while Dumak, Jaina, Kalia, and Alucia were all cheats. Duque planned that when the time was right, he would ask the great hoodwinker Valen to come out and trick Theon into eternal life in the name of the Master of Holy Light. The Empress Dowager, who had more than 40 years of combat experience, but only had the body of an 18-year-old, was intoxicating. With a smile on his face, Duque watched the performance of the leaders of the Alliance. Wow, this anti-air cannon is so powerful. Ever since Bulang was captured and brought back to fight Katyusha, Hoof had been thrown onto another mammoth tank to take charge of the anti-air cannon. The advanced technology left behind by the Titans was definitely beyond imagination. Hoof had seen the grappling hook attached to the mammoth tank fly out and grab a broken statue puppet. It pulled it directly into a burning furnace at the back of the tank. After a series of rumbling sounds, a large amount of psychedelic liquid flowed out and was injected into the tank's spare parts. When needed, Iroh only had to press a button, and the Titan runic circle engraved in the inner space of the tank would emit a mysterious blue glow. Then, the hallucinogenic liquid would be injected into the anti-air rocket's rack, and it would form a rocket by itself. It was said that it was called sulfur. Once fired, it would shoot forward at a high speed with a range of 1,000 yards. Anything it hit would explode on the spot, and everything within a 10-yard radius would be affected. What was even more insane was that such a high-damage rocket only had a gap of 0.25 seconds between shots. This was enough to make all the anti-air cannons in the Alliance self-destruct. Even the Alliance's highly classified Vulcan machine gun, which was being researched to replace the 40mm Bofors, would not have such a performance, let alone the octuple cannon. This was a terrifying firepower that surpassed the theoretical value of the Vulcan machine gun. Looking at the rapid and violent rockets raining down on the hovering mechanical attack aircrafts, the few dwarves fell into deep thought at the same time. Other than the dwarves, the other leaders were nervous and silent. Bang, 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 bang. That was the mammoth tank firing a cannon every second, a magnificent burst of 4 shots. Not far away, a large group of iron dwarfs that had been pulled over by motorcycles were instantly blasted dozens of meters into the air, turning into piles of black parts that scattered on the ground within a radius of 100 meters with a pitter-patter. Everyone could imagine what would happen to a normal person if they were hit by this advanced technology. That's right, Sister Kalia, why are you not nervous at all? I see that the other leaders are thinking about the future of the Alliance, and even the entire planet. Me? Why should I be nervous? I didn't want to be the Queen of Lordaeron in the first place. It was Duque who made me do it. If Duque is willing, I can give the throne to him at any time. Then at least I won't have to bear so many burdens and be busy all day. The hoof was silent for a while before saying, "You actually gave up your responsibilities so easily? You can bear to see your compatriots fall or die." "Of course I can't bear to. But what can I do?" Kalia, who was in the main cannon position, tilted her little golden head and seemed a little distressed. "I might pass as a priest. They all think that my holy light is already very close to the level of an archbishop. But I don't have the ability to manage and the bearing of a king. Letting someone without talent lead a country with millions of people is a disaster in itself. If it wasn't for Duque's insistence and letting Sister Elugia help me manage Lordaeron, I would have quit long ago. You know, my biggest dream in life was to be a bride." Chapter 1607. Imriel was speechless. In a sense, the queens in Duque's harem were blessed because they did not have to worry too much. If they could not keep up with Duque's development, they could just leave it to someone who could. In essence, Alterac, Lordaeron, and Kul Tiras seemed to be beginning to merge into one country. Imriel was still a little confused. The progressive king began to think about how to let his people and country keep up with the changes in the world. The queens who were full of trust in Duque simply handed the country to Duque. Imriel did not know if the Drenii could keep up with the changes in the world. If one day they could not, would it be a blessing to choose to give up the sovereignty of their people and strive to fully integrate into the Alliance? Hoof was silent. More than a dozen super chariots, built with Titan technology provided by Torim and Duque, almost flattened the way. There were rune-etched statues, mechanical gnome battle tanks, mechanical attack machine 54A, and other Titan guards scattered on the ground. When they drove the vehicles to occupy a huge maintenance platform and watched the fully automatic mechanical arms automatically repair all the damage on the vehicles, Duque finally announced that it was time for the boss battle. That's the main point. Please remember, the flame behemoth cannot be forcefully held back. That thing has thick skin and flesh and can only be ground. Don't think that you can destroy this thing with your own attack power. This guy is specially made, and his vitality is 100 times stronger than Kill, Jaden who came to the Sunwell last time. Only Titan runes can deal with Titan runes. After Duque emphasized, more than a dozen chariots started moving again, rumbling as they drove toward the final passage of the city wall. In history, a group of dwarves, after plowing the outer city wall area with cannons, impatiently ran to the final passage to continue to have a bonfire party. In the end, the party was right, but unfortunately, they became the party's barbecue. If not for the spy, Torim's reminder, the people in the hero group would never have thought that there would suddenly be a steel monster that was like a moving mountain, rushing out of the huge 100-meter door to cause trouble. Even though Torim had personally described the appearance of the flaming behemoth to everyone, and even Duque had made a 3D holographic image for everyone to see and explain the key points. To be honest, the appearance of the flaming beast was really King ugly. On the left and right sides of the carriage were two huge golden wheels, with a very dwarf-style transmission lever on top. At the front of the carriage was a shovel-like troubleshooter commonly seen on trains. What made it look like a war machine instead of a motorcycle were the 4 turrets, 2 groups of rocket launchers, and a huge cylindrical cannon that were densely arranged on the roof. When the experts of the Alliance found out that the cannon-like thing was a flamethrower that could spit out a temperature of 10,000 degrees Celsius, no one wanted to forcefully destroy this steel monster with their physical bodies. What kind of joke was this? With that kind of heat, even paladins with invincibility would not be able to withstand it for a few seconds, right? Even though they understood the logic and strategy, they were still deeply shocked when they truly faced this giant steel beast left behind by the Titan giants. Just as the mechanized armored convoy of the Alliance seemed to be walking step by step towards the entrance of the city wall area, suddenly an extremely exaggerated explosion sound came from the deepest part of the city gate. It was clearly the simplest explosion, but it was as if a terrifying aura had suddenly descended out of thin air, adding to everyone on the battlefield. It was the pressure brought about by absolute power, and a sense of destruction. Clang! The huge city gate, which was over 100 meters tall and at least 50 meters wide, instantly let out the loudest cry that metal could make under the impact of the flaming beast, and it burst into pieces. No, it was not just the city gate. Even the sturdy metal door frame of the city gate, which only had a small black mark on it after being bombarded by the 105mm howitzer, was directly smashed into pieces by this impact. Violent bricks and metal fragments shot out like a terrible storm. Even though they were lined up 500 meters away and hiding in the vehicle protected by the miniature Titan runic circle, everyone immediately had goosebumps. They felt as oppressive as if an old Kil'jaeden had suddenly descended upon the broad square in his full strength. Although everyone knew that was impossible. Not to mention the fact that the old man's upper body had just been blown up last time. It would take him 8 to 10 years to recover. And even if he came personally, it was impossible for him to emit such a simple and violent aura of destruction. Why? Eridar's destruction had a mysterious artistic aura. Enemy destroy. Magically, the electronic voice that came from the flaming beast was actually in the King common language. Immediately, the 4 super huge wheels of the flaming beast, which were at least 8 stories in diameter, began to spin at high speed on the solid mysterious material floor. But it seemed to be stepping on the brakes. Countless sparks splashed on the ground, and just the harsh sound of friction alone showed that the flaming beast was King increasing its speed to the maximum. Stop him! Someone shouted. Without hesitation, Theon stepped on the accelerator, and the mammoth tank he was driving was already the first to speed up. Wait. For a moment, Hooves almost wanted to jump out of the car. Immediately, a huge shield opened up around the mammoth tank. It was an electromagnetic shield that was mixed with the Titan runic circle. In theory, it could greatly reduce all kinds of attacks. Without giving the 3 people in the car time to react, there was a loud explosion. The strong impact, even with the external spring shock absorber of the spherical cockpit to reduce the impact, Kalia still felt as if she had been hit hard by the Minotaur Chief Kane's totem pole. Her whole body arched from the pain. Hooves, who had better physical fitness, opened her mouth wide. Her face was full of surprise, as if she still did not know what had happened until this moment. But blood immediately gushed out of her mouth and nose. She hurriedly chanted a spell, ready to cast Holy Flash on herself. Unexpectedly, Kalia, who was clearly in a similar state of confusion, reached out to her first and cast Holy Word Shield. As it turned out, it was a little unnecessary. Holy Word Shield could prevent further damage from the impact, but it was meaningless to treat internal bleeding. But Imriel still admired Kalia's reaction speed after years of training. Holy Flash had finally been cast. The 3 people in the car finally returned to normal, and only then did they realize that the battle had begun to heat up in the first second. Chapter 1608. Magic eyes had been installed in every driver's seat to act as a surveillance camera. Seeing Theon driving a tank to block the flaming beast's charge, Duque felt like strangling the Empress Dowager. Kalia also suffered minor internal injuries and had a nosebleed. Fortunately, Kalia had been a professional for many years, and after passing the heroic rank, her physique had improved by leaps and bounds. If she was still the delicate little princess from back then, her internal organs would have been crushed long ago. Theon. Damn it, where's the kiting? Come on, you're a driver now, not a warrior carrying the enemy's boss. Sorry. Duque. I'm really sorry. Theon also knew that he had been impulsive. That was the instinct of a paladin. He wasn't alone, but the captain of a tank. His rash actions would directly affect his companions in the two cannon positions. Although the mammoth tank looked huge and was 3 stories tall, it paled in comparison to the 8-story flaming beast. Too bad there's not enough earth elemental energy here. Otherwise, I could transform and there wouldn't be so much trouble. Magni couldn't forget that gorgeous transformation in Alcafen's treasury. Kite it. Kite it. According to the agreement, do what you have to do. Duke roared in the comms channel. Then 3 coquettish motorcycles sped to the front of the flaming beast. Duke, Magni, and Gerben followed the center of the plaza and scattered a large amount of asphalt in a circular shape that was almost joined together. Whoever's being chased by the flaming beast, come and run the circle. As soon as Duque finished speaking, he saw a beam of red laser light from the front of the flaming beast focused on Katyusha number 3. Ah, it's finally my turn. The driver was Duque's little servant, Vanessa. As an agile thief, her driving was also very fast. As she stepped on the brakes, she turned the steering wheel abruptly. The entire modified Katyusha rocket launcher that weighed more than 20 tons drifted in front of her. The huge rear of the vehicle swayed left and right in front of the flaming beast. What made Duque the most speechless was that Vanessa actually had a voice. Come on, uncle, come and play. That deliberately pretended coquettish voice was extremely coquettish. Duque was speechless. Could it be that even a mechanical war chariot would ask for mating? It had to be said that the female driver really couldn't afford to get hurt when racing. Other cars had to slow down to make a turn, but Vanessa didn't slow down at all when she was drifting. Asphalt was designed to trap the flaming beasts that used wheels to run. The Alliance's mammoths and Katyusha had been modified to run on tracks, so they were not afraid of asphalt at all. As for the motorcycle, if he still dashed in front of such a big pile of asphalt, then he shouldn't call himself the Akina mountain racing god. Sure enough, as soon as they entered the asphalt area, the blazing beast's 4 big wheels that were 6 or 7 stories tall became its weakness. Of course, that bit of asphalt couldn't stick to the huge wheels, but it miraculously produced a skidding effect. Just like that, the steel beast slowed down. Focus fire. At Duque's command, the Alliance vehicles that had only responded with secondary cannons all opened their cannons, pouring all kinds of firepower at the blazing beast. The asphalt that had been laid on the ground suddenly ignited into a raging fire, roasting the blazing beast's territory with a crackling sound. It was funny that dragons could spit fire, but he was immune to fire. Why would the blazing beast be hurt by fire when it played with fire? It didn't make sense. But as the battle went on, the intensity of the battle increased rapidly. The Alliance used cannons and rocket launchers against the blazing beast, as well as large bombs modified from iron ore. The blazing beast retaliated with weapons such as flame jets and missiles, and summoned more helicopter-like attack planes, as well as spider tanks piloted by mechanical gnomes into the field. When the violent firepower was wantonly shooting at each other, when the exaggerated missiles that were like fireworks drew out dazzling trajectories in the air, when the bombs crisscrossed on the battlefield, everyone suddenly realized that there was almost no safe place in this battlefield that was several square kilometers wide. Every Alliance powerhouse was aware of their own insignificance. This was not a destructive force that mortals could resist with their bodies. If they hadn't been hiding in the safety of the heavy armored vehicles, they would have long been like the mechanical guards that had broken in, beaten into pieces. It's time to eject. The first to be ejected by the human cannon was Edwin Van Cleef. As a thief, as a father with no worries, he volunteered to be the first to eject. To shoot out of the 1-meter diameter human cannon, draw the right arc, and land on top of the blazing beast, preferably in between the 4 turrets of the blazing beast. This required very accurate gunnery skills, as well as good luck. One misstep and he would type GG amidst a series of screams, and his life would be game over. He had no choice but to throw him over. The giant flame beast had a special effect called speed gathering. If he left it alone, this thing would continuously increase his movement speed until it reached 100%. At that time, the sluggish giant steel beast would become a flying mountain with the speed of a Ferrari sports car. It would be like flying, crashing and crashing. In order to more effectively destroy the blazing beast, the best way was naturally to follow the information provided by the traitor Tarim. By destroying the turrets on top of the blazing beast, it would achieve the effect of overloading the blazing beast for a short period of time. In that case, the effects of all attacks would increase by 50%. Now Edwin was going to be the first to jump. In the past, when Duque played the game, he didn't feel much danger. At most, he would slip and fall, and then call for a motorcycle to pick him up. Looking at Edwin now, even Duque was worried for him. The firepower of the 4 turrets was comparable to that of a Vulcan cannon. As if discovering that Edwin was jumping towards its vitals, the blazing beast actually activated its self-defense measures. The 4 turrets that had been raining shells on the surrounding Alliance vehicles returned to their positions in an instant, and rained a barrage of bullets on Edwin in the sky. That was a Titan's energy barrage. Even with Edwin's equipment, he would be heavily injured if not dead after taking one shot, not to mention hundreds and thousands of yellow light bullets raining down on him at the same time. The densely packed barrage made one's scalp tingle just by looking at it. Edwin was about to be turned into a beehive in the next second. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. Even Vanessa couldn't help but exclaim, "Dad!" At this critical moment, Edwin seemed to have flipped on some extraordinary switch. Not many people present saw how he did it. Suddenly, the speed at which he was falling increased. His entire body turned into a phantom as he drew a strange line in the air that occasionally curved at 90 degrees, and finally landed on top of the blazing beast. Duque was stunned at first, and then exclaimed in surprise, "Edwin has become a legendary hero." Chapter 1609. After Azeroth's physical professions broke through to the hero rank, they would reach the epic and legendary ranks. There were only a few dozen people in the entire Alliance who could break through to the hero rank. In fact, the Alliance had a batch of outstanding juniors, such as Bolvar Fordragon's daughter, Mara Fordragon, and Lena Thunderspear, the daughter of Dwarf General Fandral Thunderspear, who had been stationed in Alterac. There were also Dwarf Paladin Crom Twilight's Hammer, Great Mage Uniet, Great Conjurer Mimic, Hunter Lenera, and so on. They were all the new elites of the Alliance who had reached the hero rank. Some of these fellows should have died in history, while others only started to show their talents after the Burning Legion's invasion. It was obvious that Duque's appearance had changed their fates. Sometimes, Duque wanted to groom them, but these fellows were still a little immature. Duque couldn't be sure if he could help them grow like he did with William. Also, Duque didn't want to promote them prematurely without any special reason. The Alliance's hero squad wasn't lacking in manpower. Duque could pull in able-bodied people in the past, and he could even stuff Sally Whitemane in. However, the hero squad, which represented the Alliance's highest combat power, had a fixed number of members. If they wanted someone to join them, they had to be skilled. Strength and experience were both indispensable. When facing an opponent like Yogg-Saron, nothing major happened. Duque didn't want to train new people. At this moment, seeing that his old subordinate Edwin had broken through to the legendary rank, Duque was shocked. He had already changed too much history. The original Edwin should have died a few years ago. He had been forced to betray Stormwind City and died on a bounty. Whether it was him, Vashj, or Onyxia, these guys who were originally villains had all joined Duke's side. Even Duque didn't know how long these fellows could live, or what the upper limit of their potential was. So Edwin's breakthrough was definitely a pleasant surprise. Old Fan's move just now was a bit like Shadow Step, but it wasn't. Shadow Step definitely didn't have such a long jump distance. No matter what, At least Edwin had successfully landed on top of the blazing beast. As soon as he went up, a pair of beautiful epic rank daggers started flying up and down. Since he was using a dagger, it was not as brutal as a heavy weapon. Edwin's movements were like a butcher dismembering an ox. Large amounts of screws flew into the air, and then the entire turret was disassembled into components. At the turret's position, a distorted electric light burst out. That was an energy overload comparable to 100,000 volts of high-voltage electricity. No one would be able to withstand it. Edwin was very quick-witted. After confirming that the turret had been destroyed, he immediately fled. After doing a beautiful somersault in the air to avoid the continuous bombardment, he made a low-altitude gliding movement. He didn't even need Magna to specifically look for him as he flew to the side of Magna's car and quickly hid in the back seat of Magna's motorcycle, enjoying the protection of the armor. F***CK. Just based on this move of his, he must be given credit. The effect of the internal circuit overload caused by the explosion of the turret was extremely obvious. The blazing beast that had been accelerating just a moment ago suddenly slammed on the brakes as if it was stuck, and silently paralyzed on the spot. Even without Duque's reminder, all the Alliance powerhouses controlled their weapons and fired the cannons at full force. On Katyusha, the cannoneer didn't bother to cast the pyrite into the shape of a rocket. That was too slow. It created a large bomb in the shape of a wine barrel, and threw it directly at the blazing beast. The shell of the blazing beast that was originally ferocious gradually changed shape. Unfortunately, the overload time was very short. Tarim had made a bet that there would be 10 seconds of paralysis, but in reality, it was less than 8 seconds. It was even worse than in the game before Duque transmigrated. Fortunately, the birth of black technology and the loading of the Titan circuit made the firepower of the Alliance's special vehicles much higher than in the history of the Alliance during the same period. Especially the Mammoth tank's quadruple main cannon. The power of its desperate firing at close range was definitely above the 400 mm, and above main cannons of the Alliance's mainstream flying battleships. That was because it was using the energy of the Titan runes. After a round of simultaneous bombardment, they returned to the pattern of chasing each other. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that as long as they didn't make any mistakes in the following 3 rounds, the blazing beast would be defeated. Gavin Rad, who was the second to be thrown onto the turret, was very stable. He first activated his invincibility and took the barrage of 3 turrets head-on. When he landed, Gavin Rad, who was wielding his wind sword, seemed to have transformed into a plumber and easily destroyed the second turret. In the end, it was bounced to the ground and picked up by Jurbin. The third was Liadeline. What she had to do was almost a copy of Gavin Rad. The Blood Elf Lord's maneuvers were as fierce as a tiger's. Even though she didn't have any divine weapons, she had gradually risen to the top, so no matter what she did, it was quite reassuring. No one expected that when the fourth to appear, Daneth Trollbane, was blasted out from the human cannons, something would go wrong. No one knew if the blazing beast had the ability to learn, or if it had a different attack pattern when it was about to be destroyed. Seeing a human cannonball like Daneth flying over, the blazing beast actually F***king reversed. In the end, Daneth missed, and was sent flying to the front of the blazing beast's huge obstacle eliminator in his thick armor. If Magni hadn't sped over to pull Daneth up, he would probably be the first king of the Alliance to die on the battlefield after the third dark portal. Backup? Where's the backup? Duque yelled in the comms channel. Every Katyusha had a backup ammunition for the human cannons. The next few scenes made the Alliance powerhouses look like they had seen a ghost. The first backup was Gavin Rad, who was sent back to the Katyusha again. This time he wasn't flashy and was dodged by the blazing beast with a flick of its tail. Gavin Rad was directly ejected to the towering wall in the distance. Well, it wasn't wrong to say that he was ejected to the wall. The second backup was Theon. He jumped from the tank to the rocket launcher, but when he fired, the blazing beast dodged again. As a result, the Empress Dowager hit the surface of the huge shield-shaped wheel and fell half to her death. The third backup was Vanessa. She was intercepted by a large number of rockets in mid-air and couldn't make it through the barrage. When her equipment couldn't take it anymore, she had to use Shadow Step to return to the vehicle she came out from. The effect of the blazing beast's speed was getting stronger and stronger. By now, it was already flying. Who else? Duque was also anxious. Just then a shout came from mid-air. Me too. Me. Then, a paladin who seemed to have a tail successfully landed. Ha! Chapter 16:10. Watch me. A slim and fit blue-skinned female paladin swung a one-handed hammer high up and smashed it on the turret. Her strength was so strong that the first hammer hit the cannon barrel crooked. It was fine if the cannon barrel was crooked, but unfortunately, the last turret that was firing at full power actually fired in front of a person who was racing on a motorcycle. Yes, it was Duque. This scared Duque half to death. Because it was not a normal cannon shot. The F*King cannon shot in a circle like a left hook, and it even hid behind a bunch of rockets. Even the system elf could not catch it in time. After all, Mark Dooku was a level 2, and the calculation and operation of the system elf was definitely a level lower. Regardless of the process, it was not the first time Duque was F*King tricked by Hoof. It was just that none of the previous times were as troublesome as this one. If Mark Dooku died again, he would not be able to find a replacement, and if there was a small problem with the magical communication, it would not be surprising for the whole team to be wiped out. Hoof. Get down after dismantling the turret. Duque finally could not help but curse. Hoof was dismantling the turret as if she was demolishing a house. Just when she was enjoying the process, after being shouted at by Duque, Hoof panicked and realized that the turret under her hammer had already been destroyed, and a huge energy flow was accumulating at the base of the turret, which was already a big hole. Ah! With a scream, Imriel kicked the ground with both of her hooves, making a beautiful movement similar to an antelope's legs, and finally flew out before the giant flame beast overloaded. Fire! Bulang shouted with all his might, almost squeezing out the last bit of air in his lungs. In an instant, an overwhelming amount of cannon fire hit the giant flame beast, and the powerful shockwave from the cannon fire alone sent Hoof flying even further away. Ah, save me! Hoof screamed, because she suddenly realized that she had fallen into a fire belt made of asphalt. In a second, the Alliance's new dish, braised hoof and soy sauce, was about to be born. Suddenly, a grappling hook flew over and grabbed the hoof's unreasonably thin waist with incredible precision. A huge horizontal force pulled the hoof back from above the sea of fire. This was the last chance to focus fire. If they didn't destroy the flaming behemoth this time, the flaming behemoth would no longer have the chance to overload and activate gather speed again. In the end, all the Alliance vehicles would be destroyed, and the Alliance's hero team would be completely wiped out. Duque didn't care so much about the hooves. He activated all the weapons on the motorcycle and poured a barrage of bullets at the blazing beast. Boom! There was a loud bang. As the first and most distinctive iron behemoth boss that the Titans left in Duque, it finally fell under the siege of the Alliance's vehicles with an earth-shattering explosion. At this moment, Duque realized that he seemed to have forgotten something. Duque did not expect that the hook would not be able to pull the hoof to the back seat. Instead, the damn hoof broke free, and he was smashed into the cockpit like a fallen tree. Bang! The impact was like Mars hitting Earth. Puppet Mark saw stars. Looking at the blurry display, Duque, who was in Karazhan, felt a headache. When the display returned to normal, something seemed wrong. What the hell was this thing that looked like a camel toe? Wait, why was there a tail? In the next second he felt pain. The shared feeling that Mark Dooku gave Duque made Duque feel that something was wrong. Woo-woo. The sound of hooves could be heard from below. Only then did Duque see clearly that the hoof was in the driver's seat, playing with Mark Dooku. While it was struggling, a long blue tail was moving around, slapping Mark's face. F***ck. What kind of divine body is this? At this moment, Duque was on the verge of breaking down. The shameless maid and Mount No. 1 were smirking. Not caring so much anymore, Duque made up his mind. He asked Mark to pull the hoof's tail, and pull out the guy who would occasionally lose his mind. Woo-woo. What was that just now? I almost couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to suffocate to death. The flustered hoof covered its, but as it expressed its feelings, the veins on Duque's forehead bulged. He could only comfort himself amidst the malicious laughter around him. Mark Dooku isn't me. Not me. As the largest central boss of the first half of the wall area, the giant flame beast stopped moving. All the defenders in the wall area also stopped moving. The first stage of the attack was considered perfect. At this time, everyone crawled out of their vehicles in fear and carefully looked around. None of the vehicles were in good condition. The mammoth tank with its 3 gun barrels twisted like a fried dough twist, the Katyusha with its rocket launcher blown to the top of the city wall. The motorcycle with its 2 tires burst and only the wheel frame was left standing. This scene was as embarrassing as one could imagine. Fortunately, no one in the entire team was seriously injured, let alone dead. Magni, I'll leave the remaining 3 guys in the wall area to you, Duque ordered. The next 3 bosses in the city wall area were a bit more normal. Whether it was the giant boss Ignis the Furnace Keeper, Ancestor Dragon Edge Scale, or the mechanical giant XT-002 Disassembler, none of them were a match for the Alliance's hero squad. With the strategy in hand, defeating the boss was not a problem. I'll stay. As soon as Jurban spoke, Duque knew what he wanted to do. The master craftsman secretly kicked Magni's calf, and Magni immediately understood. Duque, these mechanical creations are all controlled by Yogg-Saron anyway. Maybe one day, even if the Titans descend again, they will purify the whole of Otter. Then we might as well take advantage of it. Think about it, our Naxxramas. That? The Dwarf King stuttered, and Duque only wanted to laugh. This bunch of dwarves were really addicted to picking up trash. Duque straightened his face and said righteously, whether it's the guardians that the Titans left in Azeroth, or us native creatures who voluntarily protect Azeroth, our position and goal are the same. How can we covet the things of our allies? No. We must return them to the guardians of Otter. Duque's words made the dwarves shiver, and they all lowered their heads, not daring to make a sound. Unexpectedly, after Duque finished lecturing them, he changed the topic. Of course, if we do our best to make the guardians regain their rationality, and kill Yogg-Saron before the Titans descend, we will return Azeroth to a pure land. Then, on account of this achievement, I believe the Titans will not blame us for the Flame Behemoth or XT-002 being completely destroyed and taken away for recycling, right? The 3 dwarves went from being disappointed to being pleasantly surprised. Then, after a long while, Jurban finally said, I finally know why you are the commander of the Alliance, and why I have to listen to you. Chapter 16:11. While Duque was attacking Otter, Arthas was not idling around either. The Lich King rarely left his ice throne, except for a few matters such as this. How is it? This was a special testing ground located at the top of the Ice Crown Fortress. When the 2 Scourge Army officials heard Arthas's question, they looked troubled. They looked at each other. In the end, the genius scientist in charge of the Scourge Army's development of various plagues, Zeros, poisonous gas, and ooze, Professor Putricide, who was now an undead, took a step forward in the face of the Lich King's possible wrath. He looked at the petri dish that was as large as a tall building, and its surface was soaked in a green viscous liquid. Dozens of withered white bones were suspended in the liquid, but these bones seemed out of place in the surrounding green viscous liquid. They were not dissolved by the viscous liquid, and because of the aftermath of some power in their bodies, they resisted the adhesion of the viscous liquid. And a translucent blue dragon soul was floating slowly in it, as if it was sleeping. He shook his head. The Damned Alliance and the Sleeping Dragon Temple have purified him too thoroughly, and his soul is on the verge of collapse. It is very likely that, even if he is recast as a bone dragon, his combat power will still be weaker than the previous Syndagosa. Is there no other way? I don't need his rationality, I don't need his endurance, I only need his combat power, even if it's for a short period of time, Arthas said in a low voice. Another Scourge Army official, the Blood Queen Lanise, suddenly said, actually, we still have a method that we haven't tried. Even a crazy and ruthless character like Professor Putricide suddenly changed his expression when he heard the first half of this sentence. The soul fire in his eyes flickered nonstop. You mean that thing? No. The power it contains is too terrifying. We can't control it at all. What thing? Hearing this, Arthas's interest was piqued. After being betrayed by his teammate, the professor could only bite the bullet and say, actually, when the sleeping dragon temple had no time to deal with us, our excavation team dug up something interesting in the northwest of Dragonbone Waste. At first, we didn't know what it was. We only knew that it was very huge, and then, the professor explained in detail to Arthas. Soon, a slightly high-spirited voice came from under the Lich King's heavy ice-blue helmet. Sure, let's use it. As soon as she finished speaking, Arthas focused her gaze. Her blue eyes beneath her helmet instantly traversed space and landed on Alexstrasza and the Red Dragon Legion, who were crouching on the outskirts of the Iceground Glacier. It was precisely because of the Red Dragon Army's cover and suppression that the Lich King's troops could not openly leave the Icecrown Glacier. The only way out was the secret passage that extended from the Iceground Glacier all the way to the ancient Spider Kingdom, Ajo Narab. Not long ago, the Calamity Army's war against the Spider Clan was very intense. That was because the Arachne would dig a hole and flee if the battle went south. Despite the fierce resistance of this underground kingdom, the Scourge troop eventually occupied this place and slaughtered some of the Narab insects. Now it was full of scars from years of war and disrepair, and it was divided between two forces. A portion of them became Arachne loyal to the Lich King, the standard undead Narab. The other part was located at the bottom of the ancient kingdom in Anka, where another group of enemies called the Faceless Ones were restless. Obviously, destroying the undead Narab insects and their contaminated eggs would be a huge blow to the Lich King. Now, Bulang Bronzebeard led the dwarven elites to encircle the undead Narab, using the latest underground engineering equipment of the Alliance. It wasn't that Arthas didn't have the thought of killing Bulang. However, to create a more powerful Dragon Lich servant, he needed to do it himself. In the end, he gave up on going to Ajo Narab. Damn big lizard, I wonder if you will still have the courage to fight when you see this thing? Arthas's mutterings were destined not to be heard by Alexstrasza. On the Eastern Front, the alliance led by William quickly pushed forward after taking care of the Vrykul people. Now they had already arrived at Zudak and were cleaning up the undead trolls. At the same time in Otter, the Alliance heroes had already killed their way into the front hall area. After eliminating the special boss, the Flame Behemoth, the remaining progenitor Wyrm's sharp scales were suppressed by Gavin Rad's wind sword. After being knocked to the ground, it was forcefully locked to the ground and beaten up. Ignis the Furnace Keeper was a little like the Flame Guardian Corellon in Alkavon's treasury. In a sense, it was a copy of him. However, this time, it wasn't just one hero that fought Ignis, but more than 20. The XT-002 Dismantle that was guarding the checkpoint was also unable to withstand the attack of the Beast's Alliance and quickly fell. While Jurban was working hard on how to restore the Flame Behemoth for his own use, Duque was interested in studying the XT-002 Dismantle that had been destroyed in the city wall area. Technology couldn't be improved in a single leap. No matter how good the technology was, it had to have a sufficient industrial foundation. This was like taking an AK-47 mold back to the primitive era and preparing to mass-produce AK-47s to conquer the wilderness. Suddenly, you discovered that you still needed lathes, assembly lines to produce bullets, gunpowder, various metal mines, and smelters. The current technological development of the Alliance was very uneven. They had unscientific things like flying battleships and cannons that were close to the level of Earth's World War II, but they couldn't make a rifle that was at the level of World War II. They couldn't even make a clumsy rifle like Mozingana. Basically, they were stuck in two areas: steel-making and the lack of fine processing ability. Most of the time, they could only use thicker parts to make up for the lack of details. But the XT-002 Dismantle was different. This was an unscientific robot powered by Titan energy that was close to being an arcane type. The arcane puppets that filled the streets of New Silvermoon could be said to be a weaker version of it. Elven craftsmen with casting abilities had spent thousands of years, but they had only managed to remake the most of it. That was why they were called arcane puppets and not arcane robots. It was because they lacked the crucial self-control, enemy tracking system, enemy judgment, and the ability to use firepower to respond. Duque wasn't a programmer. He couldn't make up a program out of thin air. If he was given a ready-made example and asked to modify it, he might actually have a chance. On this day, everyone saw Mark Dooku holding the core of the XT-002 dismantle with all 10 of his fingers. He didn't move, didn't say a word, and looked like a stone statue. The 3 members of the Iron Parliament in the front hall had been defeated. The giants Kalangan and Wuxia had been defeated. Only then, in Karazhan, did Duque's eyes suddenly emit a sharp light. Done. Done. Chapter 16:12. In Tarim's storm temple, Tarim's huge body was pacing back and forth. Beside him, Arcavon and the other 4 watchers quietly leaned against a huge pillar of the temple, not saying a word. They were all waiting for news from Oder. No one knew Oder's defense better than Tarim the Guardian. If everything was normal with Oder, it would be an absolute defense that would make any mortal in the world despair. Even if Oder's defense was greatly weakened due to Yogg-Saron's erosion, it was not something an ordinary team of powerhouses could handle. Tarim, what's the hurry? There are still 23 hours, 22 minutes, and 11 seconds until the agreed time, Arcavon said coldly. Sigh. I know. I just can't calm down. Even if Odin and Tyr are missing, Loken has been destroyed, and I deliberately did not care, letting the Watchers fight on their own, but that is still. Tarim stomped his feet, surrounded by wind and lightning. All your worries, please wait until after the agreed time. We are now asking for help from the most powerful mortal team in all of Azeroth. They are blessed by the Star Soul, and have the possibility of approaching the limit of the planet's capacity. Since they killed Thun, we should believe that they will not be killed by those who are not qualified enough. It should be said that as the Rock Watcher, Arcavon's temperament was the calmest. In contrast, Tarim, who had the characteristics of a storm, could not stay calm. At this moment, Tarim suddenly turned around. On the platform outside the Storm Temple, a portal opened with a whoosh. Peerless powerhouses with powerful auras stepped out from it one after another. The leader was naturally Duque, and behind him were Onyxia, Vashj, and the newly promoted demigod Sylvanas Windrunner. Almost at the same time that he noticed their arrival, Tarim rushed over with the 4 watchers. When the 5 supergiants ran, the earth shook and the mountains shook. Duque smiled bitterly. Before he could do anything, Queen Sylvanas snapped her fingers, and a gentle tornado lifted the 4 of them up. It felt extremely soft and a little weird, as if they were being held up by a thick ball of cotton. Duque praised, I didn't expect your understanding of the wind to increase again. Of course. Queen Sylvia puffed out her chest proudly. How did you? Halfway through his sentence, Tarim suddenly looked surprised. The front has been cleared? Duque's face was filled with pride. Do you really think our team's achievements are just boasting? Tarim was a little embarrassed and didn't know how to respond. In the past 25,000 years, it had been a complete joke for a mortal to challenge a demigod. In that era where astral souls had yet to awaken, all levels were firmly solidified. In order to break through the limits of mortals and reach a higher level, one needed talent, hard work, and absolute luck. In a sense, the High Elves had brought Sargeras in because they hated the barrier of power, and crazily pursued higher levels of power. Even if Azeroth's Star Soul was aware of the impending danger, and let go of the restrictions of mortals, it still wouldn't be possible to achieve victory in all the battles from Archimonde to Ragnaros, to Nefarian, to Thun, to Kil'jaeden and so on. This wasn't something that could be achieved through luck alone. Tarim, who had always been dismissive of the outside world, finally began to take the power of mortals seriously at this moment. Tarim knelt on one knee, lowered his huge head, and looked at Duque at eye level. Next, it's our turn, right? Duque nodded. Yes. The puppet avatar I sent into Oder has already investigated, and Yogg-Saron's state is not complete. If we are fast enough, we can wake up your colleagues, and then gather the Alliance heroes and all the demigod-level combat power that can be mobilized to deal with Yogg-Saron. Duque's words made Tarim a little excited. When Duque first followed him to Loken's temple, he was full of pessimism. At that point in time, in his opinion, there was nothing that could save Odor's fall. For the sake of his dead wife's blood feud, for the sake of his own duty, he was prepared to fight Loken with all his might. Now the situation had been greatly reversed. The addition of Alkovan's 4 guardians had greatly increased the strength of the guardians. If the 4 of them fought alone, none of them would be a match for Tarim. If 2 of them fought together, it would be very difficult for Tarim. If 3 of them fought together, Tarim would definitely lose. If the 4 of them fought together, Tarim would definitely kneel. With them, in addition to the 4 demigods on Duke's side, Tarim was now full of confidence. All right, Duque, we'll all listen to your arrangements. Tarim took the initiative to relinquish command. Although this was an agreement, without the outstanding performance of the Alliance's hero squad, Tarim would probably have some doubts. Duque did not argue. He directly spread out Odor's map and announced, "There are only 3 leaders left in the Guardian Temple area. They are Freya, who was originally in charge of the Temple of Life, Hodir, who was in charge of the Temple of Winter, and Mimiron, the Master Craftsman. Of course, to prevent Yogg-Saron's lackey, General Vizax, from rushing over from the higher levels of the Stairway of Madness, we must also make arrangements." Duque first pointed to the entrance of the Stairway of Madness and the Guardian Temple area. "Alkovan, I'll leave this to the 4 of you. Until we fight the other guardians and let them regain their sanity, I'll have to trouble you to defend." Alkovan let out a rumbling sound. He patted his rock-solid chest. "Leave it to us." Duque then pointed to the right side of the map. "Hodir, who controls the power of winter. Onyxia and Vashj, you 2 are in charge." "All right," the 2 girls said in unison. "As for Freya, who controls the power of life, leave it to Tarim and Servanas. I hope you 2 can use violent attacks to directly destroy Freya's defense." "All right. No problem." Anyone who controlled the natural life element was famous for being able to wear down their energy consumption. Without a strong enough attack, it would be a never-ending battle of attrition if they broke through her defense in one go. Letting Tarim and Servanas deal with Freya was also a risky strategy. Duque believed that they could do it well. "As for me and the Alliance heroes, we'll focus our strength on dealing with Mimiron." At this point, Duque's eyes shone with an intriguing light. That's right. He was tempted. Because be it the flaming behemoth XT002 disassembler, or even the mechanical guards of the entire city wall area, they were all Mimiron's masterpiece. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.